Hey folks, Andy the Taxman here. Now over the last 11 months, I've gotten tremendous and positive feedback, emails, ratings, and reviews from many listeners of the show, and I wanted to share a couple of those with you today. I was left a 5-star review from Wrestling With the Truth on Good Pods, and they said, 5 stars, the Taxman is quickly becoming one of Canada's best wrestling historians, thanks to the work that he puts in into every episode. While I'll never put myself over as one of Canada's best wrestling historians, I hope to get there one day, and I appreciate the kind words from Wrestling With the Truth. I had a very nice note left on Twitter from @JimmyAdig. He says, good stuff @6_podcast, the Twitter handle for this show. Loving Grappling With Canada. The episode of Ronda Singh was amazing. Canada does not get enough credit in wrestling. I like the series, bro. You're giving good historical facts. I appreciate that, Jimmy, and I try very, very hard to include as many truthful and factual accounts as I possibly can in every episode, so I appreciate the sentiment. I was left another 5-star review on Podchaser, this one from BC Hunter. He says, Andy is one of the best wrestling historians that Canada has to offer. All episodes are a must-listen for any Canadian wrestling fan, or wrestling fan in general. And I appreciate that because, as everybody knows, this show is not just about Canadian wrestling, but also about wrestling history and what Canada does mean to the rest of the world in the grand scheme of things, which brings me to my last one that I want to read to you all right now. So this one came from Fireside Canada, a tremendous podcast as well. I hope everybody goes and checks that out. This was left on Podchaser as well. He said, 5 stars. My knowledge of wrestling doesn't go much further than childhood favorites like Jake the Snake and Junkyard Dog. And in brackets he says, and now you can guess my age. Nevertheless, I'm captivated by people talking about their passions, and as I listened, I found myself sharing the excitement about an athlete I had never heard of. Next thing I know, I'm watching a 50-year-old TV broadcast of Gene Kiniski battling Japan's Giant Baba, observing the otherwise reserved crowd throwing garbage into the ring, and marveling at Kiniski's talent for being a quote-unquote heel. Enthusiastic, educational, and slightly nostalgic. Give it a listen. And that's really what I'm going for here. A show that appeals to everybody, whether you're a history fan, whether you like Canada, whether you like professional wrestling, whether you just like human interest stories. And that's what I try and bring to you guys every month. I'm incredibly proud of producing a program that features a lot of history, a lot of personal experiences, and a lot of personal stories that appeal to a wide range of people, regardless of just wrestling fans, if you will. And quite frankly, you're going to hear stories on this show that you're never going to hear anywhere else. And isn't that really why we're all here? To learn something? I'm asking for everybody's help right now to keep all of this going. This program takes an exorbitant amount of time physically to produce every month. Little behind the scenes look. Each episode takes me roughly between 30 and 50 total hours to produce, research, coordinate guests, etc., etc. There's also a financial responsibility that I have towards this show. So, this is the perfect time now to help me out and to help produce further episodes and further seasons of Grappling with Canada. If you look at the Linktree link in your show notes, you'll find various ways that you can donate to the podcast. You can choose $5 options and increments on buymeacoffee.com/grappling. You'll also find a link to my PayPal account where I would ask if you are able to donate to the program. And also, if you're listening to this on Good Pods, there is the tip jar function where you can also donate to the program. All of that will continue to help this program grow, to help me out with the research towards the program, and to help provide more in-depth discussion and in-depth historical research on this program that we all love. And for me to continue to provide what I think is a great look into the personal lives of some of the most influential people, not just in Canadian wrestling, not just in wrestling in general, but in Canadian history as well. So once again, I'm asking for your support. Click the link in your show notes for various ways to contribute to the show. And as such, If you do contribute to the show, I'll make sure that I give you a shout out in the next month's episode. So once again, use the Linktree link in this month's show notes to see particular ways on how you can donate to the show. And I really appreciate it in advance, and I look forward to chatting with all of you in regards to that. So thank you for your time, and let's get into today's podcast.
Wait a minute, what is this? What is that? Who is that?
Stay with us.
Who?
That's not Bull Nakano.
She's even bigger than Bull Nakano. Is that a she? It's bigger than Bull Nakano. What?
Is this woman from one of the fans?
It isn't a fan of the cops would be in there, but
let's get some security out here.
I can't see her face. She's got to go 300.
Did we take a break? Are we still on? Are we still live?
Are we on here with this thing or what? Who is it? You didn't tell me nothing. What's going on here?
Alondra holding her throat right in the nose.
Who is it?
That woman, whoever she is, just kicked Alondra place right in the face. Stay with us, everyone. We'll continue.
If you knew her as Bertha Faye in the WWF, you would have taken her as everybody else did. Not seriously, as a joke character. But if you think that Ronda Singh, the woman behind Bertha Faye, was anything like that, you are sorely mistaken. This month on Grappling with Canada, we take an in-depth look at the incredible career and legacy of one of the most feared, one of the most vicious, one of the most intense and dangerous women wrestlers of all time, the Monster Ripper, Ronda Singh. Hello everyone, and
Welcome back.
to Grappling with Canada. As usual, I'm your host, the Taxman, and I'm really looking forward to today's episode, which I think is going to open a lot of people's eyes to one of maybe the most misunderstood, not just women, but Canadian professional wrestlers, quite honestly, in history. So I'm really looking forward to today's episode covering the life and career, the very impressive and very, very misunderstood and, quite frankly, misreported career of Ronda Singh. Now, before we get into all of that, I want to thank everybody for checking out last month's episode on Archie the Stomper on the Mongolian Stomper Archie Goldie. I had a ton of tremendous feedback, and I had a lot of family and friends of Archie Goldie reach out to me, which I always get such a kick out of, and I'm very proud that I'm able to connect with people through this program who maybe knew the person that we had covered, maybe they had relatives that knew them, maybe they are a relative of that person, and they're kind of able to reminisce a little bit in regards to what we've been covering on this program. So I was very happy to have the pleasure of talking to a lot of friends and family of Archie the Mongolian Stomper. Really, it's just such a treat to be able to connect with people really across the world and from all walks of life who share their stories and who continue to remember the people that we cover in the episodes monthly. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off this month's episode. You can find this program, Grappling with Canada, on all major podcasting platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, etc. Good Pods as well. While you're listening to this program on any one of those wonderful devices and podcasting platforms, make sure that you subscribe to the show. If you have the option, please leave a 5-star review, and please leave a written review as well if you have a chance. Really helps me with the direction of the show, and really it's just nice to read some nice things that people are saying about myself and about the work that we're putting in here at Grappling with Canada. You can also find this on YouTube, youtube.com/C/6sided podcast. We are marching our way to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're almost at the 500 mark. So even if you listen to this program on your preferred podcasting platform of choice, try saying that one 3 times fast. Make sure that you also subscribe to us on YouTube. It would help me immensely. As well, you can connect with me on Twitter at 6_podcast. You can email me at any time, 6sidepod@gmail.com. That's all letters, no gimmicks, numbers, anything like that. You can also come and find us on Facebook, facebook.com. Use that wonderful groups search bar and search for the Grappling with Canada group and come on in and join the fun. As well as I'll invite you to like the Grappling with Canada Facebook page. Once again, use that page's search bar, search Grappling with Canada, and make sure that you like the Facebook page as well. In addition to all of that, it would help me immensely if you would do what you're probably doing anyways right now, looking at your phone. Go ahead and share this program with your friends and family. We're trying to get the word out, and we've experienced tremendous growth over this past 11 months with the program, and quite frankly, that's all thanks to you guys. So keep sharing the program. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things wherever you buy, sell, trade, barter, or borrow, or listen to your favorite podcasts, and one of those being Grappling with Canada. I really much appreciate all of the support and all of the sharing of the program that's been happening. So once again, I want to thank everybody for all of that. As well, we have t-shirts available finally at threadless.com/grapplingwithcanada, or it might be grapplingwithcanada.threadless.com is where you can find those shirts. We have a bunch of fun designs up there. Just of note, the classic Grappling with Canada logo, all proceeds from that show are being donated to charity, as I've said in multiple episodes. There's been quite a few of you that have already taken advantage of that, and I thank you very much. If you purchase a shirt, make sure that you share it either on Twitter or on Facebook, preferably in the Facebook group, and I'll be happy to share that. And yeah, we'll just have some fun with it and show it out as well. So once again, grapplingwithcanada.threadless.com is where you can find those shirts. You can also support the program via donations using the link tree in your show notes. You would have heard a little bit of that previously to this show. And you can find various ways to support the show on there, whether it's buymeacoffee.com/grappling, whether it's a direct link to PayPal, or whether it's the tip function on GoodPods. Some tremendous ways to help support the show and really help with the research and to keep all this thing going. I also have a new 5-star review that I'm going to read later on in the show. Once again, if you leave a 5-star written review, I will make sure that I read it on the next available podcast, so I'm looking forward to getting into that later on in this show. However, today, the reason that we're all here, Ronda Singh. Now, don't let the show notes fool you, and don't let the title of the program fool you, because I know that a lot of people, their only experience with Ronda Singh was her joke, quote-unquote, character in the WWF as Bertha Faye, and also how she was used, but more specifically misused, in WCW as kind of this quasi-comedy. I don't know what they were trying to do there. And to be quite frank, at that time, WCW was a mess, both in terms creatively. They were bankrupt. They were bankrupt essentially financially because of machinations behind the scenes. But if those are your only memories of Ronda Singh, you are in for a big, big treat. Now I have 2 tremendous guests on today's program that I cannot wait to get to have you guys listen to. One is a returning member of the Grappling with Canada family. You would have heard Dr. Mike Lano on our Abdullah the Butcher episode, so I'm very happy to be having wrestling's first dentist back on the show today, as well as a tremendous wrestling writer, Javier Ojst, is also joining the program, and I'm really looking forward to everybody getting to know him, because as you're going to be hearing in this program, he's done, well, it'll be right away now, 100 articles for Pro Wrestling Stories, as well as some other websites. So I'm looking forward to my conversation with Javier and with Dr. Mike Lano, and for really dispelling a lot of the false information that's out there regarding Ronda Singh, because unfortunately, and we're going to discuss this at great detail in the episode, so I'm not going to get into it too deep right now, but she is easily one of the most misunderstood, misreported, more importantly, and really the facts of her career are just so misconstrued by so many different sources, some of it intentional, and we are going to get into that, some of it unintentional, but today we're going to do a very good job, I think, of clearing up a lot of the misconceptions. We're going to talk in great depth and detail about what she actually meant to wrestling, because there's a lot of things that she has done in her career that are overlooked and overshadowed by her involvement with, we'll say, the big promotion, something that we're going to get into later on in this episode. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to set you up all in the proper frame of mind. So, for anybody who doesn't know the Monster Ripper, Ronda Singh, from Japan, from Puerto Rico, from Mexico, we're going to kick this thing off right. So I'm going to play a little bit of intro from one of her title matches against Bull Nakano, and it really set us in the mood for discussing the Monster Ripper. So this is, if you've never heard it before, it's totally different than you've ever heard her be presented in any way, shape, or form, and it's going to set us up in the proper frame of mind and eventually the proper context as we put things into place in this episode. So enjoy this classic wrestling audio, and then on the other side, we're going to get into our program of the Monster Ripper, Ronda Singh.
今までの日本人対日本人の試合、今日ありましたよね、でメインにこういった割と大物の外人ってことです。今までの大田区体育館と違ったカラーが見られるんじゃないかなと、また今のね全日本女子の試合をよーく研究するには、こういう割とほら古い選手じゃないですか、モンスターなんか、どういう風に組み入れて試合をするのかな、またどのぐらいのブル中野がトップとしてね、どのぐらいのキャパシティ持ってるのかっていうのが測れるんじゃないかなと思うんですよね。なるほど、違った観点からも興味深い戦ですね。だっていつもブルとかバイソンでしょ相手が、だからこういう外から来た割とビッグネームで、しかもベテラン相手にするときは、どういうブル中野が見られるのかなっていう。おしゃれですね、モンスター。加藤さん、かっこいいわ。モンスターリッパーでかいですね、いつでも。そうですね。さあ今青コーナーからチャレンジャーモンスターリッパーの入場です。モンスターおしゃれですよね。よく、自分のさ持ち味をよく知ってる、知り尽くしてるね。さあ今夜4度目の防衛戦を控えるブル中野、ハウスはこのモンスターリッパーなのか。
Ronda Ann Singh was born February 21st, 1961 in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And from a very young age, she knew that she wanted to be a professional wrestler, including skirmishes with neighborhood kids, as well as wrestling her kindergarten classmates in school. So from a very young age, we see the seeds planted that would eventually come to be known internationally as the Monster Ripper, Ronda Singh. Now, I could go on and give you the Coles Notes version of her life told by other people. However, I find it very important to include as many of the quotes from the actual people who I'm showcasing on this program as possible. And I'm going to be quoting from a couple of different articles to give you guys more context about Ronda Singh, the person, and as well as the characters that she portrayed. And I hate to use that term, characters, but that's what we're going to go with anyways in terms of this conversation. The characters that she portrayed in various wrestling organizations. So this is a quote from Ronda herself. She is talking about how she kind of got into wrestling itself. So, quote, Stampede Wrestling was a big influence because you had it on TV Saturday mornings. My mom used to go out and take us if we had been good through the week. She always had 4 ringside tickets for about 20 years. When I was 5, I wanted to be a wrestler. I was in kindergarten beating up the other kids. Everyone who knows me in my neighborhood remembers me telling them I was going to be a wrestler. It was like a lot of wrestlers in the business now. They knew it when they were kids. And she would go on to say how she actually got started in the business, which is something that we're going to go into greater depth and detail later on in this program. But I want to give you her description in her words. She's quoted as saying, I was actually in Hawaii on vacation, and zapping through the channels, I stumbled on Japanese women's wrestling. They were hitting each other with chairs and everything. It was an all-girl company, and I thought it was the coolest thing. It sparked my interest. That's definitely what I wanted to do. So she goes on to give a little bit more context about her time getting into the business. She ended up reaching out to Mildred Burke, something that we're going to discuss later on in the program, and was accepted to Mildred Burke's wrestling school. She's quoted as saying, I cleaned out my bank account and told my parents that this is what I wanted to do. I said to my parents, give me 3 months, let me see if I can do this. And she would talk about her time in Mildred Burke's school. Some of the Japanese girls came out to LA to train and scout some talent. Burke was the only U.S. trainer having women go to Japan at the time. And they were saying, hey, a fat girl, we like her. And she laughed as she said this. That was in November, and by January I was main eventing in Japan. I could tie my boots and do a backdrop. I was pretty limited. And she's very conscientious in her quotes of being absolutely realistic in where she was at that point in time in her wrestling career. And she would go into further depth. And again, this is something that we're going to discuss later on in the program as well. Her first match was in Japan with a partner, Mayumi Konami, against the Beauty Pair. She was quoted as saying, it was my first match and I won. The Japanese girls resented it because they never had to lose. If they lost to each other. They never lost to a foreigner. She would say further, they literally kicked the shit out of me. I was the first foreigner that they had to lose to, and they didn't take it kindly. You were working 7-8 times a week. You had to roll out of bed and bit by bit get up because you were just dead. And she would further discuss her time in All Japan Wrestling, including a time where she had to start defending herself because of the abuses she was suffering at the hands of the other, not only professional wrestling students that were there learning, but also the wrestlers in the ring who were taking out their aggressions on her, this new up-and-coming foreigner who was getting the monster pushes. Quote, it was just a matter of defending yourself and saying, I'm not going to take this anymore. Once you got respect, it became very easy. They always respected you and feared you. So she would spend an exorbitant amount of time in Japan from the 70s into the 80s. And then she eventually would come back to Calgary in the early 80s. But she has an interesting take on this as well. Quote, I didn't want to wrestle there until I knew I was good enough, she said. This is your hometown crowd and people you grew up with. The first time I came through, I was with a Mexican girl that was in Japan as well. We were only going to do 2 weeks. Stu Hart liked us so much that he kept us for 4. He wanted us to go longer, but we had to go back to Mexico. And she would say further about her time in Stampede Wrestling. Quote, this was one of the best territories that anyone could work in. The people you meet there are still your good friends. Everyone had a good time. You didn't have any of the problems that you have in the dressing room now. There was never anything that ever escalated to a major problem. And she also knew that she was in a very advantageous position, and she didn't take it for granted as some other people do. She was quoted as saying, in this business, you're really fortunate because it allows you to see a lot of the world that you would never otherwise get to see. And then we talk about her time with the WWF. So her career starts in Japan. She quickly becomes a very big established star there. She starts doing tours in Puerto Rico, in Mexico, all around the world essentially, making a name for herself, the Monster Ripper, Ronda Singh, which eventually gets her hired by, at that time, one of the two top companies in North America, the WWF. She would be quoted as saying, "It was the best and worst of times. Because I started in Japan, I had a reverse philosophy than those who started in the States, and their dream is to wrestle in Japan. Mine was to wrestle in Madison Square Garden," she would say. "I had that opportunity years ago when they had Wendy Richter," she said. "Moolah called me up and said that she wanted me to do a couple of pay-per-views with Wendy. The thing was, Moolah wanted half my money. Why would you take my money when you're not doing anything? I didn't even know her. You wanted to go, but you knew it was going to be a guaranteed loss." And she would talk about further her debut in the WWF and what it was supposed to be versus what actually happened in real life. And her matches, specifically with Bull Nakano, were big factors in her wanting to go to the WWF. Quote, "We had big heat in Japan, so this is what they wanted to do," she recalled. "Medusa was going away and she was getting new boobs and a new nose. For 3 months it was going to be Nakano and I. She was going to drop the belt to me, Medusa was going to come back after a while, we'd add a few more girls and make it a legitimate women's division. Eventually, Medusa and I would battle for the belt and it was undecided from there. I had a 2-year contract, so we were going to space it out over that time." But as WWF fans know, that is not at all what actually ended up happening. Quote, "The whole storyline went down the toilet," she said. "The only way we could save it is if we were able to hurt Medusa because she was still scheduled for surgery. We had to get rid of Nakano to get me in there at the same time." And she had an interesting quote about somebody who we're going to be talking about a little bit more in today's episode, and that was the person that wrestling fans would know as Harvey Whippleman. Quote, "He actually did live in a trailer park. He was that guy. That's who he was. He never bought a roll of toilet paper in his life. He'd always just take it from a hotel or a truck stop." She would talk about how they changed her character from the Monster Ripper to what WWF fans would come to know and resent as Bertha Faye. Quote, "They put me in that character. You're not doing something you want to do. I was Monster Ripper for 15 years. It was hard to walk away from all that personality." She would further say, "I couldn't do these moves that because certain guys were doing it. You went in every night with one arm tied behind your back because someone else laid claim to it. I was doing these moves on a daily basis for 15 years and now I couldn't do any of it. No one wanted you to look better than they did. I did power moves. That's who I was. It sort of stripped my identity. You're going to the ring, skipping and blowing kisses, looking goofy. You just went to the bank and cashed your check. You felt like you were pimping yourself out. You were a prostitute for Vince. The guys were doing it too, so you know what people had to do for their money." And she would also go on to how it all really started unraveling for her. Quote, "There was no real storyline. There was nothing really going on. We were just there. In the background, you'd have Medusa calling Vince all the time, asking why we weren't on TV. When you only have 2 girls, you can only do so much. She had limited skills and basically did the same thing all the time." Now, because of the lack of interviews that Ronda Singh had done, particularly in English, there's a lot of articles in Japan, but they're almost impossible for me to access at this point in time. So what I'm left with is essentially secondhand accounts for the most part, but I was able to stumble onto an article from The Providence written in 1984, and this one really does shed some more interesting light on Ronda Singh herself and where she was in that point in time, because you got to remember 84 would have been 11 years before she even came to the WWF. So this really gives you more context of Ronda Singh at this point in time of what she was doing and what she really thought about the wrestling business. So this article is from the Province newspaper in 1984, and it was written by Sorrel Saidman. The title of the piece is really sums up what I'm getting to with this whole Ronda Singh program, and it's titled, She's Real Bad. Ronda Singh is one of only a handful of women wrestlers on the Canadian circuit. 23, she was born and raised in Calgary, where she still keeps an apartment, but much of her 5.5-year career as a pro wrestler has been spent in Mexico and Japan. In the latter, a national hero under the name Monster Ripper. In Canada, she is often billed as a Japanese wrestler, though her ancestry, many generations removed, is in fact Chinese. At first, she's quoted as saying, "My family didn't think highly of the idea," smiles Singh. "My mother would shake her head. I have 3 sons and it's my daughter who wants to be the wrestler? But it was my mom who got me interested in the first place, taking me to matches when I was growing up. My dad wouldn't go. He's still never seen me wrestle except on videotape." Despite the family's objections, Ronda rolled into the all-girl Mildred Brooks School of Professional Wrestling in Los Angeles, soon after graduating high school. Japanese wrestlers spotted her there and took her to Japan, retrained and groomed her, and, at 18, she was a main event in a country full of wrestling fans. She admits it was a lucky break. Quote, "I didn't want to type letters for somebody 9 to 5. I wanted a challenge, something different. In wrestling, once you get to a certain level, you go where you want, work who you want, when you want, and ask what you want for it. And you make a lot of money." Singh is on a 4 to 5 week series of matches around Wrestling Canada with the company, who's televised regularly in 54 major centers in 22 different countries. She's pitted against Rosie Marino of Mexico, and she admits that competition is sparse in North America. Quote, "I win 99% of my matches anyways. Against Rosie, it's 99.98%. She's a lot smaller than I. I could probably kill her, break her up, but then who am I going to work with? I haven't broken into the States yet. I think they're scared of me. The American girls are lazy. They just play it. I don't." In the world of pro wrestling, Marino is the good girl and Ronda is bad, quote unquote. Being the only 2 women on the tour, coupled with Rosie's lack of English and Ronda's ability as an interpreter, she speaks fluent Japanese as well as Spanish, and that's something that we're going to get into later in the program as well. They do spend some time together once out of the ring. Ronda stresses competition and, like most wrestlers, she resents it being classified as entertainment. Quote, "I'm an athlete. Everything I do involves strength, speed, and power. I like to beat people up. They're going to do it to you, so you better do it to them first. When I'm in a vicious mood, I'll draw blood. People are sick-minded. They like blood and gore, but we're not going to kill ourselves for them. They've got a lot of time and a lot of hand in all sports. In hockey, they're not happy unless they see someone fight. In wrestling, if they don't see blood, they get cheated. Or they feel cheated." And her quote in all of this on the article itself is, "I like to beat people up," which I think is tremendous, and it really does showcase kind of the mentality that Ronda Singh had in the ring at that specific time, and it was something that she carried with her in her legacy in Japan, in Mexico, in Puerto Rico, and other large markets, unfortunately, until she got to the quote-unquote big times. And this is something that we're going to discuss further on in this episode, and this is something that wrestling fans seem to have a hard time with, is this notion that if you don't make it in the WWF, somehow that qualifies you as not being a big wrestling star. There's a misconception with some North American wrestling fans that other promotions in other countries like Mexico, like Puerto Rico, especially in Japan, that, you know, matches are held there in front of 500 people and everybody sits on their hands and there's no excitement and it's boring. I challenge anybody listening to this program, and I normally don't talk about specific wrestling matches, so I just want to make that abundantly clear before I quantify what I'm about to say here. But I challenge anybody to go onto YouTube, type in the Monster Ripper, and watch any of her matches from Japan with Aja Kong, with Bull Nakano, really anything, and understand what it was like for her being an outsider, being a foreigner, coming into Japan, creating this massive buzz. And you can see literally when she's walking through the crowd to get to the ring for her match, she has security around her because the fans are hot. People are legitimately upset when she's just killing their favorite Japanese wrestler. You can watch matches of her in WWC in Puerto Rico, where they have these wild cage matches, one in particular with Wendy Richter, which we discussed a little bit later in the episode as well, where it's an absolute just bloodbath. These two women are just beating the hell out of each other. They go in the crowd, they're throwing chairs around. They're doing stuff back then that male professional wrestlers nowadays would have a hard time doing. And it's absolutely incredible. And the buildings are crazy. The amount of fans is insane. And that's really something that I want to highlight in this episode. And really that's been a focal point of this whole experience of doing Grappling with Canada. For wrestling fans, there is a large life outside of the WWE, and what they present as their revisionist history is not necessarily what actual professional wrestling history is. If you would look at the WWE's version of Ronda Singh's career, she was a joke character who was kind of a throwaway with this sleazy trailer park manager and didn't really accomplish anything. Cole's Notes versions, that's what it was. And then if you take in the combined careers of her in the WWE and WCW, she really didn't do anything either. Same thing, she was paired with Oklahoma, an awful manager, just a horrific take off of JR, and I won't even get into that. That's a whole other conversation. But again, you have somebody who's presented as a joke, who's not allowed to work the way that she can work, and just used and abused. Whereas her entire career beforehand, never mentioned, never brought up, because these companies had and still have, in the case of WWE, have a hard time, for some reason, acknowledging people's successes and careers outside of their own companies. So you didn't hear the matches of Ronda Singh with a chain with Aja Kong in Japan. You didn't hear about the cage matches, four-way cage matches in All Japan, where women are literally bleeding and beating on each other and just destroying each other in matches for a championship. You don't hear about her going after fans in the crowd in Puerto Rico and almost causing a riot in Mexico. It's crazy. So, for as much as I normally don't encourage you guys to go on YouTube to look up specific things, I highly encourage anybody who has only ever seen Rhonda Singh as Bertha Faye, go out of your way, throw it in your YouTube machine, check out her work in All Japan and her work especially in Puerto Rico as well. It's, honest to God, it's better than almost anything you're going to see in today's professional wrestling scene, and it tells a story, something that is sorely lacking in today's professional wrestling environment. So, now that I've gone on my soapbox and cut my diatribe there, once again, I'm trying to highlight and really put into context the importance of Rhonda Singh and why her legacy matters. And we're further going to get into that as we move into the program. So, I'm going to bring my first guest into the program. Javier is going to be joining me right away. But before we get into that, I'm going to play a promo that she cut after one of her matches in WWC. Now, Grappling with Canada has a very international audience. I think we're heard in over 50 countries on last count. So there's a wide swath of the world that this program covers. This promo that you're going to hear from Rhonda Singh is done in Spanish, and it really illustrates the fact that she would go to these other countries, not only become a big star, but take the time to learn their language, their culture, how they do things. And I think I can't exemplify that any more than to play this type of promo. So please enjoy this promo cut by Ronda Singh in WWC. And on the other side, my incredible conversation with Javier Ojst.
Sasha, en unas poquitas horas más, yo enfrento a usted por el título de femenina. Y ese título es mía, Sasha, porque toda la gente sabe y conozco a usted por tramposa. Y Sasha, en un ratito más, en Carolina, Sasha, yo te voy a regresar este cinturón a mi cinturón, a mi cintura, perdón, porque yo soy la mejor luchadora del mundo, Sasha, y yo te voy a demostrar eso a ti y toda la gente de allá en Carolina.
All right, very happy to be joined on the program right now by not just wrestling author, but a man of many many traits right now, joined on the line by Javier Ojst. Javier, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and it's funny, we had just mentioned something off air, so we're kind of coming into this one laughing a little bit. You released, what, your 99th article in 2 years, you just said?
Well, it's been submitted. It's one of those things. I enjoy writing, and I was only supposed to write one article, and in 2 years, and if you include the pandemic, I've submitted my 99th article. 93 have been published, but 99. When they're all published, it'll be 99 total. So I'm just chomping at the bit to see which one's going to be number 100. That would be a nice number to reach, you know.
No kidding. That's incredible.
I haven't written books yet or anything, but if you add all 99 articles, that's about, what, 5 books there or something?
You're going to be getting into Pat LaPrade territory right away.
Oh, well, I super respect for Pat LaPrade with his with the squared, what's it, the squared circle, women of the squared circle.
Yeah, Sisters of the Square Circle, yeah.
Sisters, exactly. That's a amazing book, but he was on the Andre the Giant one, right? He did that one too. Yeah. So absolutely phenomenal work.
He's incredible, and former two-time guest on this program, and yeah, we were talking off air as well about all these wrestling historians that we've had the great pleasure of dealing with over the years, and yeah, he's right up there as well.
Absolutely. Oh, great work.
So before we get into tonight's topic, let's just hear a little bit about yourself for all the listeners at home who may not be familiar with yourself and your work.
That's impossible, but I can try to have them familiarize them with my work. Just kidding. Since it's a wrestling show, we got to put ourselves over somehow, right?
Well, yeah, the last thing you want to do is come on and bury yourself 3 minutes into a program. I do a good enough job of that myself, so.
Well, my name's Javier Ojst. I've been watching wrestling since around early '86. So I started watching at the tail end of the territories. I saw how things. I was there with Hulkamania, King Kong Bundy, WrestleMania 2, and I loved watching Florida Championship Wrestling, Kevin Sullivan and the Army of Darkness, and how he left superstar Billy Graham out in the desert and all that madness of Florida Championship Wrestling. And I watched of course NWA, the Georgia product, and there were a couple of years I stopped watching wrestling. I just started enjoying, just getting other interests. You start growing up, and then I was pulled back in when the NWO started in WCW and Stone Cold Steve Austin, all that. I thought those were really powerful storylines and characters. And fast forward to a couple of years ago, I don't know if you're familiar with Silver King, the Mexican luchador who died in London. I think it was 2 years ago now.
Yes. He
had a heart attack in the ring against Juventud Guerrera. Most people call him Juvie. Well, that was my first article for Pro Wrestling Stories. I just felt so indignant over what had happened, and this was I'm not good with dates, believe it or not. We're in 2021. This was around 2019, I believe. I'm not going to cheat by looking it up. But when it happened, I was just so upset that in the 2019 or 2018, whenever it happened, how is it that there was no immediate medical attention for the talent of the ring? And how is it that the referee let the match continue? He respected kayfabe so much, he basically let this guy die in the ring. You know, those things just to me, it's just crazy. So I was already a fan of pro wrestling stories, and I wrote to them and I said, you guys should write about this. This is a very important story. And the owner, his name is JP Zarka. He's a very cool guy, good friend of mine now. He said, you know, why don't you do it? It seems that you're passionate about it, and you already sent me all this information where we could take it and write the story by ourselves on, you know, take your info and write it, but why don't you do it, you know? And when he said that, I froze. I thought, me write an article? I've been a fan of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, all those magazines from the past, and I said it would be pretty cool if I could write one of these articles. And I thought, well, okay. I just responded okay without even a clue of how I was going to do it. You know, it's one of those moments in life where you think to yourself, well, this is the moment you're going to look at in the future and say, you should have gone for it, man. Just go with it, no fear, go forward and do it. And what made me feel confident doing it was that on their page, on the part where it says about us, there's a part where it says you know, that they'll do some editing and they'll work with you if you need help, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, how bad? You know, let's just submit it. You know, it's
how bad could it be?
Yeah, how bad could it be? I got positive feedback, and I was relieved. And it's that story is still out there. It's about the sad passing of Silver King in the ring. And I thought, well, that was my article. Great, I did it. You know, bucket list. And then I guess I got bitten by the writing about wrestling bug, and I thought to myself, okay, just one more. Who do you really want to write about? And I started thinking, what are you passionate about? Who's one of your favorite wrestlers of all time? And I told myself, well, let's submit an article on Big Van Vader. There's no article on him on the site. You know, they'll probably want me to do it. And of course they did, and it's just snowballed from there. And off before you were recording, we were just chatting, and I said that I had just submitted my article number 99, and it hasn't been published yet, but it's already in their drafts. They're just waiting to be unleashed to the public.
It seems crazy to me that they wouldn't have anything written about Vader. Like he was just an incredibly important character, or not character in that term of phrase, but one important person in professional wrestling history. That boggles my mind. I'm not going to lie to you.
It's possible they had like one maybe, but remember, if you grab the book by Kenny Casanova, Vader Time, you can just go through that and whatever's not on the site, you ask them, hey, there's an interesting story here. I'd like to write about this. So there's in every single book, there's a whole bunch of possible story pitches, you know. So it's possible they had that maybe one story on him. It's possible, you know. But but because when I was a kid, to me, Big Van Vader, or Vader as most people remember him, to me, when people would doubt the legitimacy, the how quote unquote real wrestling was, I would show them the match with Vader against Cactus Jack, you know, Mick Foley, or Vader against Sting. And those are some pretty brutal matches, you know.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah, if you're gonna
and I just loved watching. I loved watching those matches. I love the physicality of those matches.
Well, and then naturally, your writing that you've done for Pro Wrestling Stories is how it came across you, because in my research here for tonight's topic, Ronda Singh, first off, the amount that's out there is, we're going to say limited, and I'm going to use that in a polite term. Further to the limited amount of information that's out there, some of it is very skewed, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, especially in what you had written here, but I had come across your article on ProWrestlingStories.com, and I was like, oh my god, here's like, it was at that point of my research, it was almost the holy grail of, finally there's an article that is kind of trying to dig at what I wanted to dig at in terms of this program. And then I had reached out to you, and then you had so graciously agreed to come on the program. So I really want to get into.
Well, I asked you to beg me, and we came to an agreement. We came to an agreement, right?
Well, it was. I mean, you asked for.
I'm a pretty busy guy.
You asked for so much money. I mean, the zeros on that piece of paper that you had mailed, snail mailed me, of all things, was incredible. But you just slipped you just pushed the check toward me, and to me the zeros on the left were okay. I would want more zeros on the right, but they were all on the left of the decimal point. But I'm saying, okay, I like Ronda Singh. I like writing about her, and she deserves the spotlight for real, for sure. Well, see, I wrote that check in French, so that's why it looks like that.
and just one thing I really wanted to mention, and when you wrote to me, I love feedback from readers. Most of it's positive, not really any negatives. Sometimes it's negative because they just don't like reading what they've just read, but if that's what happened, and based on our research, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, happened, but if you're given the facts, right?
What you said to me, I really took to heart, because you said that my article was fair, and that's exactly what I was trying to do. I wanted people to understand that Ronda Singh, if they remember her as Bertha Faye in the WWF, it's not a terrible thing. These are characters and gimmicks that are given, they're placed upon the wrestler. It's like an actor, in a movie. And I know we're gonna get into this, but my point was, I wanted people to understand how this evolved, for better or worse. But in the end, Ronda Singh was very, very talented with whatever role she was given in any of these companies.
And that's, I don't want to put myself over, but the reason I was so complimentary about the article was exactly that, because what you had written, that's my intention of this program as well, right? Throughout every topic that I've covered so far, I've always tried to present, a fair and factual presentation of whoever it is. Unfortunately, in the wacky world of professional wrestling, kayfabe exists not only in the ring, but also in some of the things that you read. So when I read your article probably 3 times in its entirety before I even emailed you, because the first time it was like, okay, I think that this is exactly what I've been looking for, but I want to make sure. So I read it again, and then on the third time, I'm like,
took off the rose-colored glasses and read it again.
Without it, yeah, yeah. So without, oh yeah, let's see if I can sign this guy to a big ass contract to get him on the program. But
yeah, first you read it enamored. And then you read it, okay, without any heart. Let me just read it cold.
Well,
just read it like I'm not like I'm a researcher. Maybe I'm not even a fan. Let's see where this article goes, and just.
That's exactly it.
Almost like an editor, but just cold, top to bottom, right?
Well, and here's the further to that. I honestly, when I started reading it, my first thing was like, okay, I was already setting myself up for disappointment based on the other material that was out there. So
based on my other articles.
No, No. Based on the other
Based on
articles
your other
written
article,
on Bertha.
Let's see if he hits this one on the target, because the other ones have been way off. The other ones look like copy paste from Wikipedia or something. Let's see if he does this one right.
This sounds like Hannibal wrote it.
Oh man, I like his stuff. I don't think he writes though, right?
Well, I think Wikipedia writes his stuff for him. But anyways, so like I said, the article is tremendous. Got in touch with you, and we're gonna get into it right now. So, as we're kind of talking about it, what drove you to write the article? Was Ronda Singh somebody that you had previous knowledge about, or is this somebody that, as you were kind of researching or rediscovering your love of pro wrestling, that she was kind of one of these figures that you had come across and were interested in? Like, what drove you to write this article?
It's an interesting story. It was actually a reader's request. They wrote to Pro Wrestling Stories, and the owner editor asked me if I wanted to write about her. I had a couple of days where I wasn't writing, and I'm trying to think about what I should write about next. And boom, he just said, "Hey, there's a person who would love an article about Ronda Singh. Would you like to tackle it?" And I said, "Absolutely." I got chills, and I said, "Absolutely," because I love writing. This is. I thought to myself that this is an opportunity to spotlight someone who has been maligned over her WWF, the character they put on her. So I thought, okay, it was at first difficult researching about her, but little by little things just kind of fell into place. And I did know about her as Monster Ripper in Japan, and a little bit about her in WWF, but I wasn't really, I can't say I was really a fan of her in WWF, but I was younger. But now as an adult, it just, to me, it's amazing the change they did with her. To me, it looks like they send you a Corvette, they send you a sports car, they send you this amazing, proven vehicle. People for 15 years, this vehicle has performed, and people have paid tickets to go watch this car race. And you all of a sudden start altering it from top to bottom because you can. And that, to me, is the Ronda Singh / Monster Ripper / a Bertha Faye story. You know, it's fascinating but very sad.
And I mean, we're gonna get into this a little bit later as well. I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse to say, but you know, it's still something that we see in today's modern age of professional wrestling. But that's a topic that we're going to get into a little bit later in our discussion tonight. So it was
a reader's request. The answer to your question was a reader's request, and I was glad to write about her. And I definitely like how the article turned out, and it's gotten good feedback. It's gotten great feedback, actually.
Now,
when you were
researching the article, did you have a hard time to get the facts about her career, or how was your experience kind of separating fact from fiction in regards to, you know, Ronda Singh and Bertha Faye, and then obviously at Monster Ripper as well?
Since she's not alive and there aren't too many interviews of her, you have to kind of grab what you can, different articles, different books, and try to see if one says what the other one says, or at least is similar. If one is totally different than what the other one says, then you got a problem.
Yes.
And you put that aside and you continue your research. And you go with, let's say, for example, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is so dangerous because anyone can go in there and write something. Many times there's references to where the information came from, but many times that those articles don't exist anymore. So that's another stumbling block. In my case, I use Wikipedia as a super general guide. It's like a guideline, but every sentence I read, I really kind of analyze it, like, that doesn't sound right. And then I start looking in other places and other sources. If I can avoid writing anything about from Wikipedia, I do, because first of all, that's not my work.
Yes.
Second of all, Wikipedia reads like Wikipedia. That doesn't read like a story. It reads like an instruction manual.
And especially when you read it like this to your interviewer. Yeah. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
With my hoodie on and my skull background and my red and black video game chair.
Oh, goddamn.
I'm glad he's way up there and I'm way down here in El Salvador, so he's not going to find me.
It's like I think he's a 24-hour drive away from me, so whatever. He can look me up if he needs to. But anyways, so yes, the request comes in. You start.
So you just kind of have to with these articles. You have to use your sixth sense, and one huge thing about when I write, one huge thing is if I'm reading some other person's work, and I think what they're saying is correct, that cannot be copied exactly like their work unless it's reference to their work. It has to be. I respect people's work so much, and the last thing I want someone to say is this guy just copied my article and he just, I do not. That to me is first of all, and every single writer should just protect themselves from that. There's stories out there that everyone agrees on, like, let's say the plane ride, the plane ride from hell thing. Oh, God, yeah. Everyone's talking about Ric Flair, and basically only he's denying it happened. So my instinct tells me that it did happen. That's kind of how I write my articles. And just so people won't crap on me, you have to protect yourself and say, look, I got it from this source. So don't be coming at me. This is the original source, and this is what they said. All right. So, so it's a very fun but complicated process writing these articles, and we just hope for the best, man.
Well, and you, like I said, you hit it out of the park on this one. And for myself, in the research to getting into Ronda Singh, yeah, there was a little bit about her. Pre-wrestling days, we'll say, growing up, like how she was exposed to wrestling in itself. And I thought that you had a fun little anecdote in your article here. So for everybody sitting at home, Bertha Faye, but more commonly known in this program tonight as Ronda Singh, was born in Calgary, but she used to go to the Calgary Stampede wrestling matches. But I love the line you have here, that her mom would take the kids only if they behaved, which I thought that was a nice touch.
Well, that's from that's been stated in different sources. So when I see it, when I say sources, I mean books. I mean articles from websites that have been out there for a long time, not just something that's out there. So I thought, okay, I believe this happened. If I include this, I don't think people are going to start jumping on me and say that's not what happened, because according to 2 or 3 sources, that's what happened.
Now here's an interesting.
Actually, I believe Rhonda Singh says that. I believe she says that. So.
What's interesting in your article as well is how she started getting into the business itself, because this is something that's been misquoted, misrepresented over the years. So there was many different stories going back and forth, that she had tried to get trained by the Hearts, but some sources said that they refused to train her because she was a woman. Some sources said that they weren't training women at that time, because at the time, I don't believe that women's wrestling was being as featured in Stampede Wrestling. What were you able to kind of find out about separating diverging stories about her initial trying to get started with Stampede Wrestling.
Yeah, I read that too. Just like you said, that's exactly the right way to do it, because if there's conflicting sources, you tell the reader some sources say this, some sources say that. And I read that they didn't want to train her because she's a woman. But not really because she's a woman, it's because they didn't have women's wrestling at the time. That's what I understood. But I also read Bret Hart mentions it wasn't like that. It wasn't really like that. It was more like a scheduling conflict. So I try to give him the benefit of the doubt. I can't see the Harts telling her flat out, no, we're not going to train you for these reasons. I believe maybe there was a scheduling conflict, and also I would think perhaps they didn't see the potential in potential draw in her or women's wrestling. I can't recall. I'm not a huge Stampede historian, but I don't recall any women's wrestling in Stampede Wrestling. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was there women's wrestling in Stampede?
There was.
Very little, but they were people that were brought in, right? Not really homegrown.
Yeah, they would parachute in matches. So like you would have your Wendy Richters come in, for example.
Oh yeah, of course.
And obviously because they had the match, we'll get into it later, but quite often they would parachute in matches. There was very little quote unquote homegrown talent that was used. If I'm wrong, I'm sure Heath McCoy is going to be listening tonight, and email me, Heath, if I'm wrong, and feel free to correct me. But the territory was never built on that, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, but everybody has to understand, like we're in the late 70s at this point in time.
79.
Yeah, and
she debuted, what I understand, 79, 80, right? So this must have been. She started wrestling, from my research. She wasn't even a year in her training when she went to Japan. So this was 78, around there.
And here's the other thing to keep in mind about that point in time is Stampede Wrestling was on a downturn. I don't think it was until maybe 79 when the territory started getting hot again, because this was after their big run of stars, like the Stomper was gone, Dan Crawford was gone, I believe, and a lot of the big names were all out of there. And this was just before the time that the Bulldogs would have came in. So you're looking at this kind of a down period. So she's kind of in this perfect storm, right? They can't train her because of time constraints, and they're trying to get this territory fired up again. And then the other part of it is there's just, even if they did train her, what are they going to do with her?
Yeah, so I gave Bret Hart the benefit of the doubt, because I didn't want to look. I mean, I want to write an article, but I don't want to just stir controversy just because. And I didn't want to write, well, they didn't train her because she was a woman, or the Harts were a-holes and they told her no. If I can avoid it, I'm not going to write that if I can't prove it 100%. So I just went with what Bret Hart said happened, So hopefully that's what happened. But it was probably for the best, because she did pretty well in Japan afterwards.
And that's a super interesting story of how that all came together, because correct me if I'm wrong, but she was on vacation in Hawaii, I believe it was, and she had saw, was it All Japan on television?
That's what I read. She was watching. She was just kind of channel surfing, bored in the hotel, and she saw these wrestlers, Japanese wrestlers, just going at each other with chairs and just doing what they do, and she was so impressed, and that's what made her think that, wow, I could do this. She was just in awe. And coincidence is that she wound up in All Japan. She was exposed to we could say the best women's wrestling out there of that era, All Japan Women's Wrestling. So that was good on her part.
Yes, because she I think she trained with Mildred Burke in California.
Supposedly she was Mildred Burke's last student in Sino,
That's right, too.
California.
That's crazy.
Last student. I thought that was amazing. I love that.
Yeah, what a great tie-in, hey? That would be her last student, and then she makes such an incredible impact in Japan.
And just a parenthesis there. If any of our readers for some reason are not familiar with Mildred Burke, I super recommend the book that's out there on her. I apologize, I can't remember the writer, but if you just search for Mildred Burke book in Amazon or whatever, it'll pop up. It's Diamonds, something like that. The book's amazing. The book is so packed with information and research so deep, and what's amazing about the research done in this book, that a lot of it was from newspaper clippings of the time. So the author had to fill in a lot of the gaps, and I'm not saying he assumed things, but sometimes he had to kind of guess what he think happened in those things, because sometimes the articles had different information about who won the match. One said Mildred Burke, the other one said so and so, you know.
Yeah, depending on the market, I'm sure.
Yeah, or the promoter who's passing along the dollars to the newspaper.
Yeah,
guys.
that's true.
Yeah.
So
then they spot her. They go in All Japan women scouts. They spot her at Mildred Burke's school, you know, and they see this 5'8". Pretty. She wasn't you know, the quote unquote fat. She wasn't overweight. She was just thick bodied, you know, and just a big girl, you know.
And you can go.
There weren't too many girls with that body type in Japan, so they must have been like, this might be interesting, you know.
And that was at the time when you know, it was customary to bring in, you know, the foreigners to be the you know, the big bad guys, the big heels. So they're looking at her and immediately thinking like, you know, we can really do something with her over there, because like you said, there's nobody like her there at that time.
Yeah, as far as if you try to think about women wrestlers of her body type before Ronda Singh, I'm shooting blanks. I mean, women were not like her, you know, before she hit the scene. As there might have been a couple, but really, I can't remember any right now.
I can't even think of a single one off the top of my head. If one comes to me, I'll blurt it out. But
and then you started getting, you know, in Japan you got Aja Kong and Bull Nakano and Dump Matsumoto and you know, big girls, you know, big very aggressive women wrestlers, Devil Masami, and all this was a little bit right after Ronda Singh, you know, arrived, you know. If not a little bit after, it was like during that period, like they were just all training together.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but she gets trained by Mildred Burke, goes to All Japan. I think she's there for, what is it, like a couple of months before she was put in a big spot already, right?
She won her first title a couple of months in, and one of the wrestlers that was in there was Jackie Sato. And Jackie Sato, she was a superstar wrestler, but I think she was also a singer, actress. She was like super over as a babyface over there. That was one of the wrestlers. It was I think Singh won. It was the tag titles, correct? It wasn't a single titles, but she won her first belt a couple months in, and lost it a couple months after. But this created resentment, from what I understand, with the other students, because here you have this foreigner, which you know in Japan is called gaijin. So you have this foreigner, they're pushing her to the stratosphere, and all of a sudden she's getting these title matches and she wins, you know, and she hasn't really paid her dues when Rhonda Singh was in Japan for the first time. She didn't even have a year of training under her belt. She was super green, you know.
And they were just,
but
they put her over everybody.
Yeah. At first, yeah. But then these other big girls started appearing on the scene. But at first, they just put the little girls against her, and then she was just slaughtering them like lambs to the slaughter, you know.
And so, you know, we were talking a bit about how, you know, that was kind of the Japanese idea back then, was to bring these big, larger than life people from North America over to Japan to be these monsters, then eventually have their hero triumph over them. And you've seen it time and time again, whether it's guys like, you know, Gene Kiniski. We discussed that very heavily in my episode regarding him. Whether it's, you know, people like Bruiser Brody was there, Stan Hansen was one, Terry Gordy, and like there's so many more that I'm forgetting. Abdullah the Butcher is another tremendous one as well. But like all of these,
the Funks coming in, Dory. And
that's right, yeah.
Dory and Terry, and you had Dick Murdoch, and you know, a lot of good talent.
And it's crazy to think, like, you wouldn't think that they would try and replicate something like that with the women in All Japan, but that's exactly what they did, and it paid off like huge dividends.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, the title she won was it was a tag title, WWA. No, she won the WWE World title twice in the 80s.
But so the first one was the tag titles.
And she debuted in a tag team.
That's right, yeah.
Against the beauty pair, Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda, 79 January. Yeah, very good. But that formula worked very well in Japan, and they still use it today. I think they still kind of fall back on that. They're always looking for the big American or the big Canadian or basically a big foreigner to come into Japan, you know.
So when she's in Japan, oh, of course. So she's in Japan. She's getting this monster push, but the Japanese wrestlers are not thrilled about this. And you know, as much as wrestling is supposed to be a work, she was taking a ton of physical and mental abuse in the ring. What were you able to ascertain about how that kind of came about for her and how she was able to deal with it?
I mean, what I understand is that she was being basically bullied. She was basically getting bullied, shot on in the ring, as they say, and you know, Japanese Joshi Pro wrestle, you know, Joshi Puro, as they call it, pro wrestling is in itself is stiffer. It's a lot stiffer, a lot more physical than most women's wrestling across the globe, and it still is today. Now you'll see that style, that strong style, in other places, but back in '79, it was the toughest women's wrestling there was, and you have this green student coming in, like we said, getting this huge push, and they're like, she hasn't paid her dues, so you know, they just start becoming extra rough on her, you know, like almost like a high school bullying kind of thing. And what I understand is Dynamite Kid, who was working with New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time, you know, I guess over there in Japan, the foreigners or the Americans or the Canadians or whatever, the Australians, they somehow they know that they're over. They find out they're over there, and they hook up, right, and they socialize. And so Dynamite Kid kind of taught her a couple of tricks of the trade and how to stick up for herself, and just teach them a lesson and let them understand that, you know, they're not going to be pushed around, you know. So I don't know any details of what he taught her, but apparently it worked, and they started respecting her more. I think it's one of those bullying things where if you stand up to the bully, they'll back down pretty quick, you know. but they're trying to test you how much they can get away with. And from everything I read, no matter what the source, Bertha, I'm not going to call her Bertha Faye, Rhonda Singh, seemed like the friendliest, gentlest, just the least aggressive person you would ever know. But in the ring, she turned into what Monster Ripper, for example, in Japan, So they tried to pounce on her, I guess, like hyenas in the jungle, try to see if they could rip her apart between all of them. But once you get a Ronda Singh stand up straight and start sticking up for herself, I don't think there would be any more bullying from then on,
And what I found interesting, both reading your article and a few other tidbits that I was able to uncover, throughout my research, is that not only did she kind of kill the bullying that she was experiencing, but she kind of started to curtail it away from the other students that were experiencing it, which I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's what I investigating for the article. That's what I read too, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was great.
Because you'll often hear like
as long as they're not bothering me, who cares? Right?
Yeah, or the flip side of it, Yeah, or the flip side of it is, well, I went through it, so then they can go through it too. So
exactly.
I thought that was super classy. To hear that was really, really tremendous to hear.
That's one of those old school mentalities. It seems like, well, I got bullied, they shot on me in the ring, and I was treated pretty bad the first couple of years. So she either handles it, or she'll be gone. I had to take it, so she's got to woman up. In this case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So naturally, she's over like massive in Japan. She's a big star there, drawing huge houses, having crazy matches. Comes back to Calgary. I think that it was in the late '80s. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they essentially just kind of made her the women's champ without a match, right?
Yeah. What I read is like they made her the women's champ because they claimed that she had beaten Wendy Richter beforehand, so that made her the champ. And when I was invited on the show, I started just refreshing a little bit about Ronda Singh, but also I was reading about Gama Singh, because you had a great episode on. I call it episode, but I had a great show on Gama Singh. I started researching a little bit more about him, and I remembered that I read that they wanted her to be part of his stable, the Karachi Vice. In some sources, I read that she was part of it, but what I read when I wrote the article, I researched that supposedly she wasn't, but those were the plans. So I'm not sure if you know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, because I think that she was put in it, but I don't think that she ever competed as part of it, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense.
So
that would explain the different way it's worded in different places, yeah.
So, and I might get this wrong, so Heath, again, if you're listening, you can correct me again, but I think that when she was getting brought in, this was during their real, we'll call it the decadent times, when they were sipping on the Karachi soda, which I think was like Scotch and Mountain Dew, and they were, in kayfabe, partying with women and having all night orgies and whatever, and then she was getting brought in as like the ringleader of the orgies or something like that. Just something ridiculous, eh?
Maybe that could be my article number 100, the Karachi Vice, the worst of the worst.
Just absolute, just despicable heels, eh? But and truthfully, how much of that is fact or fiction? I mean, that's up to the listener to decide, I suppose. That's one of those mysteries, but it's something that we did touch.
By the way, you gotta plug your shirt. You got Grappling with Canada, Karachi Vice style shirt.
Yes,
available.
sir.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. On sale right now. If you're listening to this episode, it's currently on sale. So head over to grapplingwithcanada.threadless.com and pick yourself up one today. There's a shameless plug, unintentional, in the middle of the program.
You'll be the coolest cat on the block. only super dedicated old school dudes will know what you're wearing, and super cool fans who listen to this show and know about Karachi Vice will be able to just put both together and say, wow, that's pretty genius. I'm going to order one of those myself.
And if you get stopped in the street and somebody says, hey, it's Karachi Lice, let me know and I'll make sure that I get you something special, because that would be tremendous. But anyways, as we kind of move on in this in the program tonight, so she's back in Stampede. Unfortunately, Stampede doesn't last too much longer at that time. But then she takes her exploits down south into Puerto Rico, I believe, correct?
And that's where she has great matches against Wendy Richter, who I've been trying to get an interview with for ever since I started writing. I was about to say 5 years, but I've been writing for a couple of years. So
maybe that'll be show 100.
Wendy Richter's listening. I would love to interview you. You could be my article number 100.
That would be tremendous.
But she's kind of not in wrestling anymore. She's kind of stepped away from wrestling for the most part, But so she's in Puerto Rico. She has matches with Wendy, and there's actually a cage match. At least one is on YouTube where they're fighting in a cage. It's a strange cage because I think it's the ring. I'm not sure if the ring's very low or the cage is very small. I think it seems like it just seems very constricting, the cage that's on for their matches. But they definitely had some great physical matches between them.
And if anybody knows a little bit of what was happening in Puerto Rico, all you have to do is go back in the archives a little bit to our Abdullah the Butcher episode, because you want to talk about some intense matches. Puerto Rico is certainly home of some crazy stories, some crazy matches.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it would be Carlos Colon and Abdullah Butcher in Puerto Rico. Then they go to Trinidad and Tobago and wrestle. Well, they didn't wrestle. They just beat each other up and bloodied each other.
Beat the piss out of each other. Yeah.
Let's see how much blood we can get out of each other in this match. And then I think they went to Dominican Republic. They were just those two guys between them. They just buckets of blood, man, all through the islands. Yeah. So people. Based on that pattern of matches, Ronda Singh and Wendy Richter were very physical matches, not like Abdullah Butcher and Carlos Colon just butchering, but they if you watch Wendy and Ronda Singh, the matches they seem a little messy. But I believe that's good because real fights are not super perfectly choreographed. So it really does seem like that there's heat between them because one, like let's say Rhonda Singh would pull Wendy's hair, and Wendy super great at selling when she's in pain and everything. So, but I would say those hair pulls were legit painful for her. So the matches are very interesting. If I would recommend a Ronda Singh match that's not in Japan, I would recommend her work against Wendy in Puerto Rico, for example. That's
a fascinating point that you bring up, and it's something that kind of gets overlooked in today's era of modern wrestling is the believability of what's happening in the ring. So when you could exactly to your point, when you can go back and watch that cage match, and I have watched it, it looks like a struggle. It looks like a contest. It looks like they're trying to one up one another rather than, oh, what's the next spot? Oh, now we have to do this. Now we have to do this. There's no cooperation. There's no choreography. They weren't sitting in a hotel room, writing this thing out on loose leaf beforehand. This was like, let's go in the ring. let's show them what we can do and have a physical, a strong match, but a match that is going to give the fans that extra sense of, I know that wrestling is fake, but these two don't like each other, and you can see it in the ring.
Yeah, these two are almost like Johnny Valentine. I can't convince you that wrestling's real.
Yes.
I can't convince you that wrestling isn't fake, but I can convince you that I'm real or something like that.
Yes.
So if you go, and I hate that word fake because people just don't understand. Okay, let's talk about it being a work. But then all of a sudden I hear people say, oh, wrestling, they're not really tough guys. Wrestling is like a dance. It's like, and he's almost saying like wrestling's like ballet. Some comments out there, and I just don't like getting into these Facebook fights. I really don't like to get into them. But some of these comments out there, I'm like, listen, man, pro wrestling is a work, yes, but believe me, it is one of the toughest, most dangerous things that you can do if you don't know what you're doing.
Oh God, yeah, you're in a world of hurt.
And if you don't have a partner that, and if you have a partner that doesn't want to take care of you, that could be basically your last day walking like a normal human being on Earth, if they really wanted to, And going back to that point where of choreography, if you go back to wrestling, how it started, wrestling was supposed to mimic, and it was supposed to be like a fight between two people. It wasn't. Now it's unbelievably choreographed, and it's a beautiful thing. If you look at it as art, it's amazing. But most of the time, it does not look like a simulated fight anymore.
Yeah, it's I don't remember who coined the term, but
sometimes that is quote unquote crapped on by certain fans. If they look at the old school stuff, they're just kicking and punching. But the point is, each kick, each punch means something. There's a reason behind everything. Not if I'm throwing myself off the top rope 10 times in a match, it doesn't mean anything anymore. But if my last the way I pin you is off the top rope and you don't get up, it shows that that was a powerful move.
Yes, that means something.
But if I do the move on you 10 times and you get up 9 times, why are you not going to get out of it on the 10th time? Is there some kind of energy bar like in video games where after 10 times you just didn't have enough energy to get out of the pin? So basically, we're two grown men here talking about the logic of pro wrestling, but let's move on.
Yeah, because we could do an entire show on that, I think.
Well, that doesn't make sense, but that makes sense. Okay, we can be here for all night.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Get into that. We can go into that.
In terms, and here's something that I wasn't able to find out. Maybe you would know. When she was wrestling in Puerto Rico, we're just going to stay there for a second before we move on. When she was wrestling in Puerto Rico, was she still the Monster Ripper, or was she going by Ronda Singh there, or would you know?
I believe she was Monster Ripper. When I can speak Spanish, so I could clearly. Well, in my mind, I believe I hear Wendy Richter's future husband. What's his name? Well, he used to wrestle, but he became Wendy Richter's husband, and he's a commentator. And I remember him saying Monster Ripper, so I believe that's what she went by. Yeah.
And then after that, she goes to AAA, and she was it La Monster there, or what was her name in Mexico?
Yeah, they started calling her La Monster. So I guess Monster Ripper. I guess in Spanish doesn't really roll off the tongue so well, and really doesn't. So La Monster is easily understandable because you got a big woman, and it's like a monster, and it's not she's like not a model type, and because I guess Mexico, they're used to, again, certain body type, not a big woman like Ronda Singh. Now I'm calling her Monster Singh. That would have been a good name.
That would have been a cool name, yeah, for sure. Would have. That'll be in the show notes, hey? What could have been?
Yeah, people in Mexico do remember her. She wrestled against what was her name? Marta Villalobos, which was another a big girl, but Mexican girl. But she was usually in 3-on-3 matches, which they call Australian. They call those Australian tag matches, Australianos, 3-on-3.
So she has this career in Japan with All Japan. She has her this big run in Puerto Rico, a run in Mexico. Now get into the unfortunate run with the WWF 95. So
15 years of success. That's the preface to this. 15 years of 14 or 15 years of being Monster Ripper, either Monster Ripper or Ronda Singh, and she's just dominating. People who have seen her say, "Well, this girl can go. She's big. She's agile." And then she arrives on WWF as Monster, as a Ronda Singh. But then something happens.
So okay, and it's extremely important that we really, really reiterate what you just said. She has this incredible career, essentially across the globe, of this character, which is not really. I hate the term character, and it bemoans me to use yes, real persona. Yes, tremendous. So she has this persona. It works, and it's over, and people are ready for it because she's believable as hell. And B, she does it so well that, anybody who wasn't a believer, it doesn't take very long for them not to be. So,
yeah, we're talking about late 70s into the 80s and early 90s. Right now, the secret is out that wrestling is probably most likely a work. But then you have this woman who looks like she's just beating the crap out of people. Like, isn't this supposed to be fake? That's what she was. Monster Ripper was believable, like you said. And she arrived in WWF like with a bang. The way she arrived was great. It's just what happened afterwards that is just a travesty in wrestling,
And so she arrives on the scene. I believe it was she attacked Alundra Blaze after she had defended the title against Bull Nakano. And
Bull Nakano, yep.
Nakano. Well, everybody says it different. I'll blame that on my Canadian accent, if you will. But so she comes in, she absolutely destroys Alundra Blaze. To the point where people are like...
It looks like she's... Go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, to the point where the fans are like, what the hell?
Yeah, and I encourage people to go back and look at that. It's right there on YouTube. You don't have to be paying Vince McMahon any money. You can watch it for free on YouTube. It's there. They haven't taken it down yet. You see Monster. You see the lights go. You see the lights go off. And when they come back on, it's this huge woman. I think she's all in black leather, face paint, huge hair, and I think it was Law. I think Cornette was the announcer.
He was doing. It was him and Vince on the call.
Yeah, he was color. She said something like, "She's even bigger than Bull Nakano," and then he goes, "Is it even a she?" This is the kind of color that is rare nowadays. This is the kind of color commentating that'll leave you without a job quick. But the point is, when Singh arrived, she just started busting up on Alundra Blaze, and it looked bad. And there's a part in the end. I don't think I guess there's no spoilers here, but this was like in '95. There's a part in the end where I believe she kicks Alundra Blaze a couple of times right in the schnoz. And it looks real painful. It was and I don't know if it just looked bad, And you can see the fans in 1995 convinced that this woman just legit beat up on Medusa, aka Alundra Blaze. I think it was fantastic how she was introduced, you know.
And it's even more incredible to think like this was at the height of the cartoon wrestling era, as I like to call it, of the WWF. This is where you had
True, yeah.
Yeah, so you had guys playing plumbers in a wrestling ring, or they were they had the dentists,
garbage
men,
plumbers,
so,
and you had dentists, and Doink was there. You know, it was they really were a little bit off the mark on what could resonate. Was basically they were doing everything not to resonate with the fans. It seemed like. And then they bring in the Monster Ripper in a hot, like, a crazy segment, and as you know, insane as she comes in, they just kill her flatter than a plate full of piss faster than anything. And then the subsequent aftermath. Sorry, you got cut off there. You're asking what happened?
Yeah. So what happened with her debut, and then the aftermath of her debut?
Well, she debuted, like I said, like just lightning striking, and I would have loved that. I didn't see that live. I had to look back many years afterwards on how that happened, but I would have loved that. I think if I would have seen that live. Couple weeks later, all of a sudden she shows up. She's like skipping in the no longer has the fearsome face paint. She gets this I guess they change her hairstyle. They put like this outfit on her with polka dots and just all these
she got the dusty
colors.
treatment.
She gets a boa. They make Rhonda Singh into a joke, a walking, talking joke, like a clown. And I'm not, and this is not on her. You know, again, I respect her work, but this was rough for her to put this on her, and especially like you mentioned, a proven entity, we're using the word persona, something that was working everywhere she went, and WWF, whoever was head of creative, Pritchard or whatever, Bruce Pritchard, somehow they decide that we're just going to make her into a joke, pair her up with Harvey Whippleman, and say that she's like from a trailer park and she's acting all sexy. It's comedy relief, you know. And I would say, to be fair, it wasn't that bad in my opinion looking back, but it's bad when you compare what she could have been in WWF. That's my point.
Now, and I know a lot of people might be thinking, okay, so you know, you guys are talking about something that happened in 95, so what is that, like 27 years ago or something? Maybe my math is wrong. About there. But anyways, so, you know, you guys are going, no, 26, because I'm 36 and I was 85. So anyways, quick math. But anyways, that we might be going a little bit hard up. But this happens today still. So and I'm not sure how much of current modern wrestling you follow. I follow very little, but I did see that they had Piper. Is it Piper Niven? But she is also Viper. She's a bigger girl. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but she is a big star in the UK, a huge star in the UK. Would come out just the same thing like the Monster Ripper, right? She is agile, work, whatever. They got her on WWE now as Dewdrop. That's her name. And she's a comedy sidekick. So for for anybody who wants to say, oh, times have changed and things have progressed, well, no, they haven't. And I guess we have to understand that it's still the same company, it's still the same WWE, and they still seem to have this. I don't know how you want to.
It's like a tendency to almost like erase everything you've done somewhere else, and we're going to do something with you totally different and prove that we can make it work. It's just a weird way to, and that goes back to they want to own the rights to the character, and I'm not, and with Rhonda Singh, you know, turning her into Bertha Faye. I'm not saying you know, poor Rhonda, let's all cry for her and all that. What I am saying is, like what you're emphasizing, it seems like these things kind of repeat themselves, where and I guess who's making the decision where they thought that this was going to work, you know. But Rhonda Singh, from what I understand, she was a trooper and rolled with this character. She seemed to have a lot of fun with it for a while, but I think deep down she was a little frustrated with it, you know.
Well, and then, like you said, they had her paired with Harvey Whippleman, who, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about him, I'm sure, in a minute. But see, you change her character. She's now like trailer park sleaze. You give her a sleazeball manager, which further adds to it all. And then they're coming out and doing these like weird like pseudo-sexual skits on the air, but then you also have the commentary team just digging in your role. That's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's you know what this is. Just go back to like when you were a kid watching wrestling, and you have no friend. Very few of your friends watch wrestling. Your parents really question why you watch wrestling, and you want them to kind of respect what you enjoy. And all of a sudden they see something like this on TV. You know, it's basically a lost cause. You're just embarrassed by this as a fan. If someone, you're embarrassed by it, watching it by yourself, but then it's worse off if someone who's not a fan watches this. They're like, "What? Why are you watching this? This is ridiculous."
And I remember, because I was in elementary at this time, and there was a few of us that were watching wrestling. Not many of us, because this is obviously before the big boom. But that was and it's horrible to say now, but that was our big joke on the playground, was like, oh, you're Bertha Faye, because she was a joke, like, she was like, we didn't know as kids who she actually was, you know.
Oh yeah,
pre-WWF.
Yeah, and that's WWF style, WWE creative, but that's been their style for a long time, where they'll just erase the past and the past accomplishments of someone and just start from scratch, and sometimes you get ridiculous results, you know.
So as we kind of progress is an interesting word, through her WWF run, not only did they change her character, but they also were changing the way that she was working in the ring as well, if I'm not mistaken.
What I understand is that she was limited. She was basically a power wrestler as Monster Ripper, but then she was limited to not being able to do certain moves. I read somewhere that they didn't let her do, I think it was a power bomb or something like that. And I didn't include it in the article because I really couldn't confirm that was true. But what I could confirm is that they didn't want her to be super aggressive in the ring. Although, if you watch her matches against Alundra Blaze, she does pretty well. If she's supposedly limited, I can only imagine if they would have allowed her to do everything she could have, she was able to do. But if she was limited, even though she was limited, they were pretty decent matches, I have to say myself.
So she kind of wallows in WWF, you know. We'll be honest, it's mediocrity at this point from what she was to where she is. She makes the jump then to WCW, but at that time,
well, she did win the belt. She did win the title.
Yes, you're right about that. But I'm talking about in terms of what she was accomplishing previous to this. Yes, I know she won the title.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
She had some notable matches.
Just before moving on, I think it's at least worth mentioning that even with this terrible gimmick, she did have the belt for a couple months. And the plan was, I don't know what happened. The plan was for her to wrestle Bull Nakano. And I don't know what happened where she wound up wrestling Alundra Blaze, which is fine. But Bull Nakano was supposed to be part of that equation too, but it just didn't happen. You know, the plan was to bring Ronda Singh in for Alundra Blaze to have quality matches like she had in Japan talent. That's why they wanted to bring Monster Ripper in. Why they changed her character, who knows again, but she did have matches with Alundra Blaze, and she did win the title. She had it for a couple of months.
Yeah, it's I don't know. The whole thing is very confusing to me, I suppose. But it is the WWF after all, so there is that. And I
think the women's division didn't disappear after this for several years.
Yes,
this
because
like the last
Because and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody will. But did this happen before Medusa left with the belt to WCW, or was this after and she came back?
I'm thinking about that right now as you mentioned that it could have been really.
Because the timelines for me is
that's a good question for your listeners, man. Where's the timeline when she went to WCW and dumped the belt in the garbage can right on TV? You know.
Because then Medusa goes to WCW, then Ronda follows not long after, and they have matches there. But it's at that time WCW like that. We're talking now. They're smack dab in the middle of the NWO, so that's the big focus. And then you have the Cruiserweight division, so there wasn't a whole lot of room for the women's division. And truthfully, all that they really had for women's division at that time was Medusa, Alundra Blaze, and then Ronda Singh. And I guess they had a couple of throw-in jobbers, but it's not like
they had a couple of women wrestlers who were decent names in the 80s. The names escape me, and they came in for a couple of matches, but nothing like you would really remember nowadays, you know, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so she's in WCW, but that ship, listen to me talk, although not everybody knew it at that time, that was going to be gone very, very soon.
Yeah, she was there. She was there when they were They were a couple of years into, you know, they were about to that ship was already sinking when she got there.
Yes.
A couple years later, WCW would be gone. So it was when she got there when it was a mess, you know.
And there's no organization. There's nobody looking out for her specifically, but you know the women's division. So again. I have to reiterate, right? We're talking about somebody who had such an incredible career from Japan to Canada to Puerto Rico to Mexico, you know, and all places in between, comes to, you know, North American wrestling fans would consider the big time WWF. We obviously know what happened with that run, and then goes to, you know, the other big time. Although at that time they weren't necessarily WCW, and then it's like like
even worse.
Out.
I think it was even worse for her in WCW. I think she was in like these mud matches, and she was in these pure comedy segments. I think she was trying to sell her stuff backstage, just not, you know, physical. It was just so weird how they started using her, and obviously you had Bobby Heenan also making cornet type Lawler kind of comments about her, just sad, and it seems like Ronda Singh is enjoying herself, but she's kind of like rolling with the punches, you know. Well, these are the cards that have been dealt to me, and this is what I have to do, you know. But far cry from a Monster Ripper. In WWF, and even worse in WCW.
Well, yeah, and it's just what a horrific end to, and like then she retires in 2000. So it's like, you know, for this 20-year plus career, and like to go out in such a whimper like that is, man, just horrible.
She passed away less than a year, like a year after. She retired in July 27th, 2001. She was only 40, and she's gone. A lot of questions remain of how she passed away. I would have loved to have read or listened to more interviews with her. There's very little information on her out there.
Okay, this is I know, obviously talking about people passing away is not a nice thing to talk about, but again, we're talking about Ronda Singh and the difficulty we have both faced kind of separating fact from fiction in trying to understand and piece together her story, both for your article and this program. Now, she had passed away, and there were, we'll say, conflicting stories about how she had passed away, and again, this it's once again not nice to talk about. Yeah,
it's one of those things you got. It's one of those things you got to be really careful with, Yeah.
The one thing I will say about this, so Harvey Whippleman, her on-air love interest, we'll call him, when she was on the WWF television,
which supposedly they never got along with,
and that's okay. So
they just worked together. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. So the story is, and he said it, and some other people have said it as well, that they didn't get along at all. They just did the angles on TV because that was the job and they had to. That being said, when she passed away, I guess he had come out in articles saying that she had taken her own life, which I thought was very, I don't know. To me, like, I understand if you had a bad business dealing with somebody, or, maybe you didn't like working with them or whatever, but I find it very unsavory.
Yeah, it's in bad taste.
Yeah, to come out after. She had died of a heart issue, is what it actually was.
It's almost like he's trying to. I mean, it's almost like he's trying to make himself the center of attention with her passing, but he wants to be the center of attention, things up, and she probably took her own life. And there's an interview with him on YouTube about him. That's his theory. And that's fine if that's your theory, but just let her rest in peace, Just let her rest, man. I mean, just it's not your place,
And I just thought it was so incredulous because it was like almost immediately, like this was his, and maybe it wasn't, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but to me it comes off as, this was his time to capitalize, or maybe get the last word, or whatever his intention was. I don't know, but to me that was, a very in poor taste series of interviews and comments to make regarding the passing of Ronda Singh.
In the end, it's all documented, and in the end, he looks terrible saying that. But honestly, Harvey Whippleman is a footnote in wrestling history, and I think Ronda Singh is much more important in wrestling overall than Harvey Whippleman, So whatever he says, honestly, I included in the article because it's something to think about. I didn't want to dedicate more than a couple of sentences about what he said,
I guess like with her lasting legacy, and I'll get your opinion on this as well. But really, there's, as we went into the 2000s, and I'm not talking about the bra and panties version of women's matches that were prevalent in that point in time. I'm talking about the Japanese women's wrestling matches. Then when we had TNA come in, they'd had the Knockouts division when they were taking women's matches seriously. And there were a lot of women from those organizations that had watched those Monster Ripper matches from Japan, from Puerto Rico, and took a lot of inspiration and took a lot of pride in the work that she had done for women's professional wrestling, what you can actually accomplish as a female professional wrestler, and brought that into their repertoire. So for as much as her last 5 years of the career was, mediocre at best, the stuff that she did previous to that still stands up today, and
it's almost like, let's put it this way, franchises have many movies, and there's some fans who draw a line between saying, I just watched the original trilogy, Star Wars. All those other movies never happened because they're a travesty. They suck. So with Ronda Singh, you can almost say, you know what, in my heart, in my mind, as a fan, to me, it's Monster Ripper. That represents Ronda Singh, and whoever was in WWF and WCW later on. I choose to ignore that persona, that character. To me, it'll always be Monster Ripper, and that's how a lot of people just put this thick line and divide her career like that, just for they focus on the positive, let's say.
And that's, again, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this episode specifically on her, because there is still a strong sense of what she had accomplished previously, but like I said, a lot of it is wrapped up in innuendo and rumor, and like I said, articles like the one that you had done especially, and a couple others, really paint the picture of, okay, she was way more than even many of the people who followed her All Japan career, for example, would realize.
Yeah, people who followed the product in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, in Japan, Puerto Rico, Mexico, they remember her. And, in the United States, people remember her as Bertha Faye, but thanks to the internet, thanks to shows like these, thanks to books, thanks to great investigative work by authors nowadays of fantastic wrestling books out there, I think her legacy is secure because there's more information out there. And Ronda Singh wasn't just Bertha Faye. She was many characters at some point, and her peak was Monster Ripper, but she was a talented lady wrestler with whatever role she was given, and I like to remember her that way. Even though she was dealt an unfavorable deck of cards, she did her best. And looking back on it, if you choose to ignore her previous work as Monster Ripper, there's a lot of things that are salvageable with her Bertha Faye character if you look at it with an open mind, and just take it as the wacky world of pro wrestling, where sometimes things work and sometimes things don't.
Yeah, it's I certainly can't say it any better than that myself. You bring up some excellent points at the end there. So as we kind of look to wrap up this segment tonight, obviously we have the 100th article eventually to get looking forward towards, but we got to get to number 99 first. So where can people find this supposed 99th article, and what else do you have on the back burner right now going on?
Yeah, there's mine at the time of recording this show with you at ProWrestlingStories.com. There's 6 more submitted, so there will be 99. If I stop right now and let these be published, there'll be 99 fantastic articles out there. But if for some reason I'm annoying as hell, I just encourage you to go to ProWrestlingStories.com and read anything else on there by the other writers. I think you'll have a fantastic time. There's all kinds of topics. The page is dedicated mostly to old school wrestling, not the newer product. And just check it out, ProWrestlingStories.com.
And I'm going to put over Sore Listen to Me talk one more time as we wrap up tonight. One other article that you had written, which I enjoyed, was the Janet Boyer Wolf article. So it's not, you're not just a one-trick pony there.
That's a
and that's a crazy story too. I know it's not related to Canadian wrestling at all, but to me that was a crazy story to read.
That's I'm not, I encourage people to look for a Janet Boyer story. If you look for it on Google, it should be one of the first articles that pop up. But this goes way back to the Mildred Burke era of wrestlers, and it's always great to learn about these wrestlers where there's so little video footage on them. I wish there was more footage on them. And the footage that you do watch is great. It's just they really, all their matches, they go 100% against each other. There's no it's just straight ahead, man. That old school women's grappling in black and white glory.
Tremendous stuff. So, where can people get in touch with yourself then as well?
If you can find me on Facebook, Javier Ojst. Last name is O-J, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, Javier Ojst. You can friend me. And I have a wrestling page on Facebook. It's called Classic Wrestling Stars, and you can check that out as well.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to go and add that one right now. So. Before I let you go, I just want to thank you again very much for joining the program tonight and for the tremendous work that you have done, and I'm looking forward to reading in the near future.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me. You do quality work, and it's my honor and the privilege to be on a show with you, and the amount of research you do for every single show is amazing. I hope people really understand that the work you do is not easy. It's a passion project, but you do a heck of a job. And thank you once again for inviting me to join you to speak about Ronda Singh, and so we can keep her legacy alive for future generations.
I appreciate the kind words, and I'm going to have you on again. This was tremendous.
Well, just we can negotiate something, I'm sure.
Yeah, checks in the mail right now.
Well, as long as the Raiders aren't playing and I'm not writing something, we can try to squeeze some time in. No problem. You just let me know.
Yeah, anytime, my friend.
It'd be my privilege. Again, it'll be my honor.
Now, before we get to my next guest, Dr. Mike Lano, I'm going to play some quote-unquote classic wrestling audio. Now, this comes from the WWF run of Ronda Singh as Bertha Faye, and you're going to hear a little bit from the sleazeball manager, who by sheer at this point, I'm sure you're aware that I don't think very much of. But anyways, you're going to hear from Harvey Whippleman. You're going to hear from Bertha Faye, known to us as Ronda Singh. And then on the other side, my interview and discussion with Dr. Mike Lano. Now, forewarning, the audio quality with Dr. Mike Lano is not what it normally is, for the simple reason as we had some technical snafus while recording. So, but it is an interesting conversation. We do get off topic a couple of times, so if the audio seems a little disjointed, there was some editing done, so I apologize for that. But we spent about 20 minutes just cutting promos on some of the modern wrestling that we see nowadays, which I didn't think was really relative to what our topic of conversation was today, being Ronda Singh. So, with all that being said, the conversation is great. There are some little tidbits that he brings up that I had never heard before, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it as well. So, once again, some quote-unquote classic wrestling audio, and then on the other side, my conversation with wrestling dentist, Dr. Mike Lano.
We're here to talk about the World Wrestling Federation Women's Championship. And let me tell you right now, Doc, my honey, my sweet potato, my gorgeous Bertha Faye, without a doubt, will be the next WWF Women's Champion. Because you see, not only is she the most gorgeous creature on the planet,
debatable.
not only is she got the intelligence to have the finest bow on the planet,
The one in her hair, the one around her neck.
but she has whooped every girl in the trailer park.
That's something to be proud of.
She has whooped every girl at the honky tonk.
Huh.
And just like you said, it is time for this gorgeous Bertha Faye to become the WWF Women's Champion. And just like our special love, that championship will be there forever.
Well, let me ask you something here, Bertha Faye. You know, I've been watching Alundra Blaze's career for a long time for more reasons than one. But anyway, you are the only person to ever injure her, to ever put her out. Does this send you into your inevitable matchup confident?
Alundra Blaze, you cannot compete with me on sex appeal because I have it all. Look at this.
All right. Nice skirt.
Alundra Blaze, you can't compete with me on men because I have the ultimate man a woman could ever want.
Oh, my. Take a look at Harvey. That's disgusting.
Alundra Blaze, you cannot compete with me on talent because I have it all. And the only thing that is going to change is that when I become the WWF Women's Champion, that belt is going to have a few more polka dots on it.
Well,
Oh, my.
I tell you, the good Lord makes them, and the good Lord pairs them.
Oh, my. Let's listen up again to this tune.
All right, very happy to be joined on the line finally via a couple of technical snafus by wrestling's original dentist, Dr. Mike Lano. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I don't know if I told you, but we're going to be talking about, obviously, women's wrestlers. I have a lot of respect for Britt Baker. I was on Busted Open with her. It's been about like 8-9 months. And, specifically, I'm on that show maybe every 4 to 6 weeks. I was on 3 times 2 weeks ago. And anyway, so like I grilled her. I was throwing out these questions only a dentist would know. We actually, for a lot of professions, have our own inside lingo or carny. We don't call it carny, but when I say a class 2 amalgam, a lot of people may not know what that is, or a class 5 foil, or, so I was asking her stuff like that, and I said, what did you have to do on your boards? What is an ideal perio probe reading on buccal and lingual? She spat that out, and I asked some other stuff, like what's a cavatron, and stuff like what's a cone cut? When you screw up doing an x-ray, when you're a dental assistant and you screw up, one of those screw-ups might be a cone cut. And Britt got all that stuff. So she's legit. I was the first, but she's the first wrestler who's a dentist. And she's done it brilliantly. Her ring gear and her video, they have all kinds of stuff. Like they have a Panorex x-ray. I think that opens her walk-on video. And on some of her ring jackets, she's got mouth mirrors, perio probes. It looks like dental high-speed drills and a low-speed drill. There's a distinction. So she was aces on that. And anyway, I know we're, maybe 2 months out from Daphne's passing. So I want people to know I've done a ton of appearances besides doing talking about Daphne, Shannon, or as she called herself, Daph Shan, when she would email you or any of us. Like another guy who knew her probably even better than me was Ring of Honor's ring announcer, a great guy. But that's the way she would email it or sign off, Daph-Shannon, or Daph Shan. But I did a 2-hour tribute on the show I do with Evan Ginsberg, nearly 2 hours, and then one on Crazy Train Radio with 2 legends I hope to bring to this program. Sue Tex Green and Tony Rose, who was part of, they were the original Glamour girls in the 70s, and they were, often second below Bruno Sammartino title defenses, etc. at Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden, Philly Spectrum, Cap Center in D.C., etc. But this is the 70s, and it was Tony Rose partnered with fellow heel Donna Crescentello, and they were the premier women's tag team. When people say, "Oh, we need women's tag titles in WWF," or now, as we've heard, they're apparently going to be almost letting that go. They've broken up all of the other tag teams except for superhero A.S. Nikki.
Oh, God, yeah. And Rhea Ripley, who lost her belt, so there's that.
Yeah, she lost her belt. She's getting in big trouble. I heard Renee Paquette, formerly Renee Young, talk about, that's the biggest sin you can commit, where you get the most penalties, and it's not even your fault. I would not blame her, but perhaps Rhea can go back to being the kick-ass person we saw in NXT, as opposed to the goody two-shoes thing we have now. I know Daphne would have hated the direction of Rhea, particularly as we saw a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what it was. It was like some children's charity, and they bring them out, and she had to speak off the top of her head, and she looked, most of us knew and could feel her being so uncomfortable. That's just not her. She could have let Nikki just do the whole promo cutting with them standing up there, sweating at the top of the ramp and talking about this charity. I forget if it was breast cancer or what, but anyway.
Well, and that's kind of part and parcel. It fits very nicely into what we're talking about today, because we're naturally talking about Ronda Singh, the Monster Ripper, and again, here's somebody who, was a badass, presented as such, and then look what the WWF did with her. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So, for yourself, do you remember what your first introduction would have been to Ronda Singh, the Monster Ripper?
I met her prior to spending a lot of time with her at the Stu Hart thing in Calgary that I'll get to in a second. We met at some show. It was prior to her. It was when I was shooting both AAA and Paco Alonso's, the Ludarov promotion, CMLL/EMLL in Mexico City. So I met her down there as Monster Ripper. Obviously, your audience knows that she was killer heel in Japan, killer heel in Puerto Rico, pretty much everywhere she went, which is why the Bertha Faye thing later on, as we'll get to, was disappointing. And it almost seemed like they were doing the Dusty on her.
Yes.
With the polka dot, trying to sort of put her down for, I'm not sure why, because Alundra Blaze, Medusa at that point, needed good, solid foes, and there's somebody else I've known since '87, Medusa, Debbie Michelli, and, she brought in specifically some of the people that she'd worked before she quit and left All Japan Women in 1990. She had that history with Aja Khan and Bison Kimura and all that stuff, and so many other ones. Aja.
Yeah, the Bull Nakano feud was a big one too.
I can't really remember. I was trying to look, but I couldn't find Medusa or Ronda against Belt Matsumoto. And for Ronda, that would have been like a perfect. And maybe somebody can call in, or maybe you even know if that had ever occurred. But I really spent a lot of time with her at Stu Hart's. I can remember the exact date because I was supposed to go in with Meltzer to Calgary, and he didn't go. He went directly to the event the next day, which was the UFC Ultimate in Denver that I went to. But I went 2 days early, got to stay at the Stu and Helen Hart's mansion. It's kind of a long story, but to make it brief, and the guest room I had was nearly directly above the dungeon. But I had been friends with the Harts since the 80s and would always call Stu and Helen. I mean, I knew all of them. Smith, who passed away, the most recent to pass away. Brett, long history, but the guys I'm closest to are Bruce and Ross. But Stu and Helen I would call every year on New Year's Day because that was their anniversary. That's when both Paul Bosch and allegedly Lord Tally-Ho James Blear introduced each other.
That's right.
In New York. promotion where I shot ringside for the program, and Roy Shire, San Francisco, that whole territory, which also encompassed Reno, and at times he did partnering with Ed Francis and Lord Blears in Honolulu for terrific shows. But those are my two home bases, and then the magazines started flying me everywhere. But that was the only territory. And my bucket list, I had a bucket list back then. It was to shoot everybody, and whether it was a small name like Prince Pollins, an African American guy that few remember, but he was terrific for Bruiser's WWA, as well as Bruiser in Detroit, and he worked some Chicago shows for Bruiser and Gagne. But anyway, so the Calgary, the Territory Stampede, totally on my bucket list because I shot in Winnipeg and Maple Leaf Gardens for Heel Sheik versus Killer Kowalski in '74, out of this world, etc. And of course Montreal for Vachon's Grand Prix versus Rougeau's International La Lutte. So I got to spend a lot of time. So it was billed as Stampede's 45th anniversary. We kind of thought that was a work, that maybe Stampede wasn't quite that old, but who knows? I don't, and I would give the Hearts the benefit of the doubt because I love Stu and Ellen. But privately, it was Stu's 80th birthday, and so that was the main thing. I got to shoot. The show was for the public at his beloved Corral Stampede venue, but the private family party, and all the boys were there, from the old original Dan Crawford to the All Japan one, the one that most know. That was Phil LaFon, he was renamed that in WWF, but Dan Crawford, the Doug Furnace, Dan Crawford tag team. So I got pictures of the original, and he was Stu's top babyface, Dan Crawford. Dan King Crow Crawford, who also worked a ton against Inoki and Sakaguchi, earliest days, or the second year of New Japan. But anyway, so I got to spend a ton of time, with Ronda. So all the boys were there: Jericho, Lance Storm, the entire Hart family, Bulldog. The only guys that didn't show, and Bruce Hart was nailing out, advance money and plane ticket round trips, were Abby and Dynamite Kid. They both cashed in their plane tickets and kept the money, never returned it to poor Bruce Hart. And it would have been spectacular. I mean, everybody was anybody. Les Thornton, former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion, Archie Mongolian Stomper, Goldie. Everybody was there. I mean, and the Premier of Canada presented a bust to Stu to him in the middle of the ring. But the private after party was way more fun. I have pictures of Natty as a little, kid, and Harry Smith and Teddy, and then the other Hart family whose last name was Annis, A-N-N-I-S, who passed away from that brain virus eating horrific condition. But so Rhonda's there, and she was at the show. I forget who she worked with. She had to do her, so we are kind of bopping in and out. She had to do her Bertha Faye on the show. It wasn't against Medusa. I forgot who she worked with, but she did great. Bruce got to put her over. I mean, like Mike Shaw, Makan Singh, who was Norman the Lunatic in WCW, Bastion Booger in WWF, and what was that other gimmick? Friar Ferguson. He had a
That's right, yeah.
They were a cute couple. I posted some shots of them together, both kind of overweight but still badasses. Rhonda and Mike Shaw was one of the nicest guys in the world before we lost him, as was Rhonda. And Rhonda used to send me results before this 1995 thing, December 15th, 1995, wherever she was. And sometimes she would call, so she was like a lot of people who were in and out of major promotions, like Sherry Martel. When she left WWE, a lot of people don't know, she went down to AAA and was managing Art Barr and Eddie Guerrero. And I got her, shot her in Mexico City and Tijuana and other places, managing them, and then some of Ron Scholar's AAA shows in the U.S. He basically bought the rights to them. Anyway, Sherry was on those. Rhonda was on in L.A. Later on, one of Ron's last cards when he split. This is Ron Scholar, who had those huge sellouts starting in 1992 with AAA from Mexico at the Sports Arena in Los Angeles. And I was already working for him, and then he fired his PR guy for getting Jake Roberts, who was supposed to be in a main event against Conan at a Berkeley, one and only Berkeley house show that was the prices were way too high, so it only did like a third of the venue, the crowd. It could have been sold out if the ticket prices were lower. But this guy who was Ron's PR guy for the AAA show, Eddie and Art were on this, Santo Jr., all of them, Mascarita Sagrada, all the big stars, Los Payasos, and Cien Caras, all that stuff. So he gets Jake there, like at the very end of the match that he was supposed to be in the main event with Conan on, that had to be changed. And the fans are piling out of the building. The main event is already over, and that's when Jake arrives. So I was hired to take over as PR from then on out. But Ronda was on a card. Ron Scholar did. He broke ties with AAA after the When Worlds Collide 1994 pay-per-view because he was stuck to get In Demand and get on In Demand's pay-per-view schedule. He had to partner with Bischoff in WCW, which he didn't want to do. So his relationship, he switched to the other much older promotion. It's now like 90 years old in Mexico City, world's oldest that Ronda worked for, as well as UWA, obviously. I don't recall her working for AAA. She was just the Paco Alonso Luderoff family promotion. And then prior to that, UWA, which was the one that had the most foreigners in there, like Jericho, Vader, Owen Hart, quite a few Americans and some European guys, too. So anyway, so Ronda's at the party, the after party. She wrestles. I posed her with a ton of people. That she knew her history. Ronda really knew her history, male and female. She could talk endlessly about Mildred Burke and June Byers, who are arguably the two atop the women's Mount Rushmore. If you're going to talk about athletes, hooker shooters, and plus all the shit they went through with Billy Wolf, who was married to both of them. And when he, was with Mildred Burke, he would cheat right in front of her with June Byers and versa. Really horrific guy, which is where a lot of folks like Sue Green and Tony Rose, who I hope to bring to the show soon, that's where they think Moolah got it, because she was so scarred emotionally, physically, monetarily by this guy who screwed all of those women. He promoted women's wrestling. He had the lock in the U.S. He did a couple of Japan tours towards the end, but he promoted women's wrestling, had all of them in the 30s and 50s. Moolah would later take over. She started out valeting for first Buddy Rogers as slave girl Moolah, and then she valeted for a guy who would become the Friar Tormenta, the guy that wrestled just to raise money for an orphanage in his church. But back then in the 40s and 50s, he was called Elephant Boy, doing a weirdo, strange gimmick. That's how Moolah started, and then she became part of Billy Wolf's troupe. And later on, though, when she took over and ran the women's wrestling in the U.S., and there at least were some indie women that were not part of that, like Vivian Vachon, who was one of the most spectacular ones, Betty Nicolai, who had two matches that were supposed to be pro-world matches. California. She was, that match with Betty Nicolai as the California Women's Champion, title versus title against Moolah for Moolah's title, was underneath really the only card at the true LA Coliseum. Not the New Japan thing 2 months ago with Moxley and Good Brothers. That was at a venue, smaller venue on the property, but it wasn't really at the LA Coliseum. The only match ever at the Coliseum was like August, I think it was 22nd, 1971, that I shot ringside for. A topic were the two longest feuds in the business. Fred Blassie is the babyface, if you can believe it, greatest babyface in Hollywood, Los Angeles wrestling history, against his guy he'd fought forever, John Tolis, in about 1 million different matches, with the greatest angle setting that up. Underneath that, the other longest feud that was lasted 4 decades. It ended in the late 80s. It started around 57, Bo Brazil against the Sheik, Neil Moskowitz against the original, the guy that died, El Solitario. There's a wealth of cards. Pat Patterson was in the opener against Paul DeMarco, but the third from the top was Moolah Nicola. Anyway, so Ronda knew all about that, asked me a lot of questions, wanted photos and stuff. So she had been partying and having beers at the arena, the Corral, the Stampede Corral, and mind you, too, it was 60 below zero. I'd never even been there, had never been in freezing weather. So Rhonda told me to like triple or quadruple layer. You know, she was smart and kind enough to smarten me up and tell me what kind of full body underwear to wear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's serious stuff. So folks in Canada know, but pussies like us in California, we rarely see that. Even though we're super duper cold. But she wanted to hear. She goes, "Well, who picked you up?" And she told me that it was either Diana Hart or Natty's mother had picked her up. And I go, "Well, Owen did, and he had his best friend on the road, Louis Spicoli from WWF, with him." And she wanted to hear about it, and she said, "Did Owen drive like a maniac?" I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Did he cuss and swear like no tomorrow?" And I go, "Yeah." There was no visibility. It was like snowing at that point when he got me around, I don't know what it was, 10 in the morning with Louis. They were the best of friends, road mates, since Owen had started. Again, we're talking 95. And I don't know how Owen drove without destroying the vehicle, but he didn't. You guys up there know how to handle it, and black ice and everything. I got to give you credit. So Rhonda wanted to hear about all that stuff. So she already had some beers at the arena, and after the show was over, we all moved, no marks, and we went to the private place for Stu's birthday party, which was huge. And I'm so happy I got to shoot, all of those Hart family members who would become stars, from Harry to Natty to TJ was there. I guess they were like high school sweethearts, he and Natty. And Teddy, the infamous Teddy Hart.
Yes, infamous Teddy, yeah.
I have a million great Teddy Hart stories, like him showing up unannounced. I had no idea he was, even going to come to California. After he got fired from Ring of Honor, he shows up at my house knocking on the door up near Oakland, California. I forget what year that was. This was quite a few years after. It might have been around like 2000, 2004, somewhere in there. He just showed up at my house, asked me to stay over, and my wife was there. I go, "Absolutely not. Get a hotel." So anyway, I know Rhonda would have a lot to say about that. It's very opinionated. So it's Stu Hart's thing. We're going back to that. She had way more beers than she should have ever had, and mixed it with some wine and stuff, and I think did some shots, Jello shots. Again, December 15th, 1995. Yeah. And Blue Chunk. So we were talking with Brian Pillman, seated next to Stu, and on the other side of Stu was Terry Funk, and Rhonda just let go and heaved. The block. She got it all over their shoes and part of Stu's pants and stuff, and then felt terrible, and she came back out with towels and wet wash rags and Kleenex and stuff, and was like cleaning off the floor. And they didn't care because they were kind of all blitzed. Everybody was having beers. Dory and Terry had worked a tag with Bruce Hart and Pillman to rekindle, the feud they had before Pillman ever went to WCW in whatever year that was, 1990, I think that's. So, Rhonda never lived that down because they gave her some shit afterwards, but she was like, when I've talked about Daphne, and there must be a lot of other kind-hearted people, but she reminded me of Bobby Eaton, who we lost just a couple of months ago. Would bring extra stuff, extra bottled water, unopened bags of, store-bought nuts and fruit, little things like that. She had extra sewing kits, and she always had them with her. So she'd ask if anybody would need them in the dressing rooms I was with her in, and just exhibited a lot of kindness. And this from somebody who, was one of those killer heels, or, her name was Monster, and which was fitting because she liked all things horror too. This would be her time of year, Halloween. And I think Halloween is unlike Thanksgiving. You guys already celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving, but ours is coming up. It's always like around the 23rd of November, whereas Canada's, I think, who determines when Canadian Thanksgiving is going to happen?
It's usually the second week of October, just whatever that Sunday-Monday combination is.
Okay. Well, you guys, on top of the U.S., you guys have it first. So she loved that stuff. She loved horror movies. She favored Freddy Krueger over Mike Myers and all those other, horrible characters, and was into a lot of that stuff. And this was before people, could watch movies on their cells or anything like that. But I'm trying to recall some other stuff about her. She was funny. She had lots of, male friends as well as females in there. But as I said, she had befriended Sue Green at a really low point. Like Sue Green couldn't even find any work. And Rhonda calls her up and said, how'd you like to go with me to Mexico and Puerto Rico and this and that and all these indie dates. And she revitalized Sue Green. This is a woman that's been working probably in pro since 62, 63, and she still wrestles, which not even Terry Funk can do anymore. Not Dory Funk, really. He's having memory issues as well as, Terry's are the more severe. I was keeping tabs with him up until just a few months ago. And the whole story earlier this year, his daughter that lives closest to him in Amarillo moved him out of the home that he shared. He and Vicky sold the ranch, the Double Cross Ranch, that I also got to stay at in '97 when they too hired me as an event photographer for what was supposed to have been one of those Jillian Terry Funk retirements. Terry would later
one of the 1,000 Terry Funk retirements.
Well, he qualified that like 3 years ago when he was still 100% mentally saying, no, that was just my Amarillo retirement.
Oh, yes.
It was billed, it was called WrestleFest. It was billed as Terry's last match ever. And guess who? I know we have a global audience, but against Canadian Bret Hart.
Yep.
Bret was the WWF World Champion at that time and defended the strap against Terry, obviously the face. And all the Harts were with and seconding Bret. That would be Bruce, Ross, Smith, and I can't remember. I think Keith was there too. So similar to how they did it on TV for WWF, the Harts, would always be there. And it's weird because once Owen passed, that kind of destroyed the family for quite a while, and there's still different factions like Diana, Owen's widow, Martha.
Yeah.
Like they don't other Hart members, and Bret has had periods when he's gotten along with Martha and not gotten along with her. And I think she's, now she's in a good place with AEW. So I just emailed her in the hopes of getting her to do some radio stuff. A lot of people, I'm talking not so much Martha, who I've also emailed, but Diana has produced and written several wrestling fiction novels involving wrestling. I don't know anybody that's really doing that, or at least on a consistent level. So chalk one up to one of Stu's own daughters on that one. But Rhonda was seemingly friends because that was where she broke in. That's who trained and finessed her. And there weren't that many females that Stu laid hands on. Obviously, his sons did more of the training of Rhonda.
Yeah.
I got late. I'm having some health issues, so I got home late. I wasn't able to, go back and re-review my IMDb history on Rhonda. But I am going to send you some photos of her in her Bertha Faye and in other gimmicks, with the heavy makeup on and the scary stuff that more people that are hardcore fans are more drawn to, as opposed to the. And that's what I say. I mean, do people view that? Others, because I know I'm an old timer, but folks that maybe came to wrestling, I started watching in '66, '65. But people who came a little bit later, maybe during the Hulk Hogan '80s, mid-'80s stuff, do they look at that and go, well, Vince was just like punishing her, doing the Dusty with the polka dots, making her wear all the polka dots and doing a ridiculous, non-threatening gimmick? I don't even know, her gimmick was so generic. Like, wasn't Bertha Faye also the name of, one of the many women that Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant was, he would refer to people. Sometimes they would be played by male wrestlers in drag, and other times you never saw them. So it was like old TV shows where a guy would talk about his wife, but you'd never hear or see her. You just hear him talk about his wife. So, I thought Bertha Faye was like a, it's sort of like when Dusty came in, and didn't they? It was prior to that. Ted DiBiase's second was Virgil. Now that was obviously Dusty Rhodes.
And that was a knock, yeah.
Virgil Riley Runnels. So that was prior to Dusty obviously coming in. But, you know, Dusty, a la Sapphire, a la Bertha, or Ronda rather, all, you know, you could never see a boo-boo face on them. They never acted like they were unhappy. They just went with the shitty gimmick. And in this case, I actually all three with polka dots. I don't know if there's a negatory, you know, polka dots. They don't make you slimming, and these were all, you know, chunky or what's the wording that they call now?
Well, like bigger or thicker people, I guess is maybe, I don't know what's politically correct nowadays.
Well, it's thick. ThickE. The guy that was so talented, so incredibly talented from Europe, that NXT let go, you know, before dismantling NXT. I think he used to wear, you know, when he first kind of debuted, it was Thick Boy, and there have been other wrestlers, but I can't think of the guy's name. So incredibly talented. He held the North American title, and then it's like they put it on him, and then like weeks later they let him go, and I'm just going, what on earth? So that was the thing with Ronda, was she finessed, she trained, she broke in with the boys. I forget who was in her class, whether Mike Shaw was in that class or not. As were others. But I know she had a lot of hands-on with Gama Singh, who a lot of folks, it bothered me that they never said in Impact when he was there managing the Desi Hit Squad, this guy's a legend.
And we got into that deep in our Gama Singh Karachi Vice episode a couple of episodes ago, because I had Trent Zabarion, who works with AAW Pro out of Chicago, and we got into a big... we got into it about how Gama Singh was presented in Impact, and just what a travesty that whole thing was.
Yeah, it hurt me because this guy helped train Ronda. He was a superstar for Stu, but the first North American territory he came to was mine in Los Angeles in '75, around the summer, you know, around June, July of 1975. Because both Tolis and Blassie are two top guys that quit. Greg Valentine gone. We had like no faces, no heels, and so Gama Singh came in along with it was called Prince Tonga, but that became obviously Haku Ming.
Yes.
And they came in together as a tag team. Sometimes they opposed each other, but they were both baby faces. And they came in. And Roy Shire sent us down to help out Don Morocco, and he also sent down Pat Patterson, teaming with Tony Gurria, who were at the time feuding with the Valiants in San Francisco. But and I'd already shot them up there, but he sent them down, you know, because we had like nobody. So Mike LaBelle, our big boss, our promoter, was begging for people. So with Haku Ming at the last Cauliflower Alley 2 years ago, I was pulling out those photos, and he swore. He goes, no, I didn't come into LA until '77. I go, no.
No, you didn't. Here's the evidence.
It was 1975. I know it because, you know, he didn't stay that long, and then he went right directly up to Stu's. I don't know how long he stayed, but then of course Gama Singh stayed forever. Total legend. Do you have folks that have any contacts for Gama? Because you put me on with him. I know his history inside and out. I could probably reel off all the matches he had in L.A., like against guys like Raul and Carlos Mata, Reno Tu'ufuli, who's related to the Anawahe family. He didn't stay in it that long, but you know, he's related to Peter Maivia and Othman Sik and all of that stuff. If you guys can find when he was with Impact, I was bugging Ross there, the PR guy, and why he's not doing anything? Why wouldn't you let me interview him on my own show or somebody else's show and put this guy over the way he should be put over from a history standpoint? You know, 70s, 80s, and that supremely bothered me. But he had a hand in helping Ronda. I mean, Ronda knew all of those guys. She knew Tommy Billington, Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy, and John Foley, who was the heel manager for Stampede, and she loved it. And whenever she could, you know, she would like come back home. Sometimes she'd just be in the back in the dressing room on, you know, the various incarnations. Once Vince bought out Stampede, they came back and tried promoting again with more new guys. Like they had a long series for a couple of months with Sabu against the late Tiger Khan, and that was called Stampede Wrestling or Hart Brothers Wrestling, and but anyway, before her death, Ronda would often, whenever she was back home, if they didn't have a female to put her against, she'd just hang in the back at some of Stu's shows, she said, and she would tell me what was going on and who was back there. And I just thought the world of her, and, you didn't see this coming. Like Sherry and Luna Vachon, because of the long-term drug use and stuff. I still have saved 3 a.m., 2 a.m. voice messages from both of them, Luna, Angel, and Sherry Martel, who I'd known forever. And they were like the nicest people on the planet. But, sometimes they'd be blitzed, and they'd call, and they were all over the map like I am on this radio show today. I'm not slurring my words or anything like that, but I never saw it coming with Ronda. I knew she was heavy set and stuff, but it's like, it's like the nice ones go. People I knew, like Eddie Gilbert from like 1968, 69 on, Pillman, who I was close with, and I participated in pretty much all. Not always did they buy my shots. Not always did I get credit. Like the FMW, there were some of my images there, but I wasn't listed in the credits, which that means more to me because they don't pay you that much for Dark Side. It's more a labor of love. But since season 1, particularly, thank goodness, some of them, like the Luna Vachon and Chris Candy ones, I was credited as not just for photos and imagery supplied, still images, but also research, and aid on the documentary itself, because I had so many stories on the road with Luna, who was also close to Ronda. I can't recall if they ever worked against each other. You might have Ronda's matchography in front of you or something. I just don't right now, but she did have some amazing battles with Cynthia and Esther Moreno in different places, Mexico and Japan. I'm trying to think who she was mainly feuding with in Puerto Rico.
Well, a lot was Wendy Richter in Puerto Rico as well, but yeah, she had some crazy matches there.
She had matches with Rock and Robin Smith. I forget where those were, but quite a few. And she would be perhaps had she stayed alive, she would be an agent working somewhere. I mean, she'd be so happy with. For example, it really felt great in my heart when Mickie James had all of the women on that All Women's Impact show, the most recent Knockout or whatever it was called. They all wore black DAF armbands, and I know Ronda would have loved that. Ronda probably would be coaching people, doing something in AEW now. She would have gravitated to where people could be themselves. They're not held back. They don't have to read and memorize promos or read them off teleprompters like in WWE. That's why AEW is like, as many of us have described it, ECW on steroids and with money.
It's a pretty apt description.
Is there? And I know she would have loved what I'm calling the whatever. Most potato-y or most hard-fought New Japan strong-style match on American soil. At least not in Canada, because there might be tougher matches. But the thing with last week with Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson,
and Suzuki,
And I've shot Suzuki in Japan as well as on New Japan cards in the U.S., like New York, Dallas, San Francisco, L.A., against guys like Ishii and other tough mofos. But that match last year, not just match of the year so far, but I think it's the stiffest match I've seen on American soil. I'm not saying Canadian, I'm just saying U.S. soil. I'm not saying Puerto Rico because it's not quite a state yet. It should be. But that match was just out of this world, and I know Ronda would have loved that. I know Daphne would have loved that. Because it just was. I've watched it a couple of times. It doesn't get old. The first elbow from Suzuki on Bryan Danielson that knocked him down, or that he sold for. Man, that was stiff as shit. That was, I don't know. What did you think of that match? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was my cup of tea. I'm gonna say that because I don't like a whole lot of the flip flop whatever. It's not my thing. So I like a nice stiff match, and that was good.
Yeah, I think Bully. I got an email from Bully saying something like tight, stiff, and just nothing. No light.
Yeah, no lights, no, you can't see through nothing.
Well, depending on the city, but there's quite a few cities that really respect their wrestling history. You cannot do a Vince McMahon whitewash of history in Toronto or Montreal or Winnipeg. I think parts of Saskatchewan and Calgary, because you have fans that know their history and they know when they're being lied to or bullshitted to. And U.S., I think there's a lot more long-term fans in Canada, dating back to 70s, and so they might be more comfortable with WWF product or more tolerant of the weirdness, the bullshit, the grabbing of signs or telling people they have to leave or take their shirt off if the shirt says. There was somebody that at NXT like a week ago that had Tony K on a sign in the front row. There was very few signs on that NXT, and they were making a sign reference to Tony Khan. Wrestling War It's On with Tony K. I forget what the sign exactly said, but I was so surprised. They don't have that mentality, or Vince isn't all over NXT the way he is with the other two programs, because they can be even house shows, not just TV, but non-televised house shows where they grab the signs, or if you're wearing a New Japan or an AEW shirt, or back in the day ECW shirts, they get confiscated and all of that sort of stuff. So I think maybe you guys are more polite, more tolerant.
Must be it, yeah.
But what is Canada's? How do they do with ratings with AEW? Because it's weird. Why has not, even before the pandemic, why hasn't Tony gone up and toured, at least done one Canadian city? I don't think they've done one, to my knowledge.
No, because our borders, the issue with the borders right now, at least. So I think that's the biggest sticking point.
But I'm talking about even prior to that. And
I don't know what they do on TSN. They never really release anything here. I mean, if you wanted to look hard, you could find it, but
I'm saying a live AEW show. I don't know. I don't have any clue, but I would encourage Tony Khan and AEW to start having some shows when it's possible. It may not be possible, because that's what we were hearing with Cauliflower Alley 3 weeks ago. A lot of Canadian people couldn't go. Greg Oliver finally found some way to go, but he kept telling me, no, I'm not going to be able to come and accept my award there, because whereas the U.S. allows anybody to come in, if I were to try to come back to Canada from the U.S., I'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks, 2 miserable weeks. And I know you guys are probably way closer to herd immunity in Canada, much smarter versus all the dumb shits down in the U.S. here, refusing to get their shots, refusing to get their boosters. Hey, they haven't even gotten shot 1 and 2 yet. I already have that. 3 days after the boosters became available, I wanted it, that bad. And I know, anyway, that brings us back to Ronda. We got way off topic.
Yeah.
This was Rhonda Singh. I am going to send you some photos of her over the...
I would very much appreciate that.
And it's good to, all the zillion shows, I don't mean to be bringing up Daphne in the context of Ronda, but all the shows I've done on Daphne, I say, as long as you keep talking about these people, they never die. If you keep talking about their careers, their accomplishments, what a fantastically incredible person Rhonda Singh was, then, because I think people sometimes forget some of those. We're hit in the face, with like 40 new NXT people, and we're supposed to be able to keep track of this, that, and the other. I don't know where not Tegan Knox, but the other one that was a heel that healed on her partner, the women's champion there. She's not listed for the main roster. I mean, just really, they butchered NXT. But I know hopefully obviously Chegusa or Jumping Bomb Angels that made this long-lasting impression. I bet more Canadians could talk about Mike Shaw, Mokin Singh, and his other aliases, and remember the U.S. fans, because again, you guys are so in tune with history, similar to Japanese fans. I would put Canadian fans just a little, perhaps a slight peg below Japanese fans who don't go for bullshit or being lied to the way Canadians don't. And U.S. is at the way bottom of that list because they can be led around very easily and have Vince try to tell us. That was the most insulting thing. Like, whenever the first of the most recent two Charlotte Bianca Belair matches, they said that the first of the two, just a couple of weeks ago, like 2.5 weeks ago, was their first ever meeting. No, you remember that one where was a year and a half ago, right before COVID, Bianca was really nervous to lock up, and she was, giving away too much and in awe of Charlotte. That match was like 2 years ago. Don't tell us these lies that these guys have never faced before, or the usual almost weekly lies they try feeding people. And people should call bullshit on that stuff. And people should remember Ronda Singh in the with the upper tier, upper echelon of folks. I bet she would have, had she lived, I bet she would have even tried some MMA. I really, or boxing, particularly now with that group doing the freak show boxing with, retired boxers or like a retired MMA guys and what have you. Like I've heard Junior Dos Santos wants to box on that thing, so I know Ronda probably would have wanted to try that for a good payday. She might have even been on Fox Network celebrity boxing, stuff like that, where because she's not a boxer by nature, but she could definitely protect herself.
Yeah, that much is true for sure. Just as we start to wrap up here, do you have any closing thoughts on Ronda before I let you go? I know we've gone long in the tooth on this one.
Well, we could probably talk more about Ronda when I bring Sue Green on soon, because she had a lot of inside stories. Ronda helped get her through depression. Ronda was caring for other people, male and female wrestlers. She was kind of no nonsense. She stood up for herself when she thought she was being shorted on paydays in Puerto Rico, for example. It happened once in Mexico and one time only, and she set those guys straight. And I have nothing but utmost respect, and what a great friend she was, putting the wrestling aside. She could talk about all kinds of other stuff. She loved comedy. She loved various genres of music, rock music, again, monster movies and stuff, and just really cool person. We lost way too young. I forget now, how old was she when she passed?
She was 40.
That's insane.
Yeah, crazy.
And she had like a whole lifetime in the biz. She really, she ate, slept, she was one of those people, 24-hour, 24/7 on wrestling. That was her life, but she did have other interests, but, wrestling was a predominant one. Great person. I hope nobody forgets her, particularly those our friends and family in Canada. Do not forget Ronda Singh. She was one of the greatest and, multicultural person who liked to, I think she would have really shined in this era with, Indian Americans and Indian Canadians. God, that was such a mark for Tiger Jeet Singh, the original, whenever he'd take on Sheik. And, she wanted to know more about him. She wanted me to send pictures of Tiger Singh against all kinds of different opponents. I sent her some shots of him against Ernie Ladd and against Bulldog Don Kent and Igor and, a bunch of other 70s legends. And, anyway, she was one of the greats and a really super person. So I hope she will be continued in people's thoughts and stay there where she belongs.
Now, before we head to the finish up tonight's program, I'm going to play some more classic wrestling audio. This comes via WCW, late 90s, and during Ronda Singh's run therein, which kind of illustrates something that Mike had brought up about how Ronda would take care of people by bringing in various other items for other wrestlers to use throughout their matches. So please enjoy this classic wrestling audio, and on the other side, we're going to finish up tonight's program.
What do you think? I think I'm going to wear these tights tonight. What do you think? The fishnet?
Fishnet? That's great.
I think they look nice.
Looks awesome.
I think I'll wear it with this. I think we'll try this black and white one. This one really makes me look sexy.
Oh, yeah,
I like
good.
it.
It's definitely good. I'm gonna wear the silver boots, I think, and let's see, what do you think?
Oh, that's nice. You know what? I think maybe you might look better with the fishnet stockings. They'll be better for you. And I think I'm going to go with these. I think I'll go with these black tights.
Really great.
Oh, we're going to look smashing tonight. It's going to go over. I think it's going to be great. I like these.
That'd be good.
Good choice. Good. Oh, thanks. I think I'm almost done. I'm just going to put this thing of elastic in my hair and I'm ready to go. Yes, I do. You look really good.
Oh, thanks.
There you go.
Thank you.
Throw a little more lipstick and I'm ready to go.
Good workout today. Good workout. That's good.
I feel good. I'm strong. I'm tough.
All right, before we finish up for tonight, just wanted to once again thank my wonderful guests that I had on the program today, wrestling dentist Dr. Mike Lano, as well as Javier Ojst. Honestly, it was a tremendous conversation with both of them. I really think that they unearthed some things that need to be heard by wrestling fans, not just Canadian professional wrestling fans, but people who have kind of misguided or misconstrued or very skewed view of Ronda Singh. So I hope that we were able to change some people's minds, open some eyes, and kind of change the narrative regarding Ronda Singh. So I hope that everybody really enjoyed the program. I hope that you will go to your way to like, subscribe, and share the program. Most important of all is to share the program with your friends and family. So while you're on your phone right now, you're probably going through Facebook, you're probably going through Twitter, maybe you're using some other sort of social media device, if you will. Go ahead and let somebody know that you listen to Grappling with Canada, that you learned a little bit in this program today. Or, conversely, maybe you learned a lot in this program today. Either way, I hope that you share the program. I hope you pass it along because it's really helping us spread the word about what we're trying to do here at Grappling with Canada. Wanted to make mention as well before I get out of here, you can find links to support the show in the Linktree link. I just said link 3 times in a row, but that's kind of fun. In the show notes for the episode, so I hope that everybody will take advantage of that. Your support would mean, listen to me talk, the world to me in bringing you further programming. I have an incredible amount of ideas for Season 2, including some tremendous deep dives that we're going to be uncovering some information that is going to shock some people, I think, in Season 2. Not that we haven't done it in Season 1, but I'm really, really looking forward to that, and it would really mean the world to me to have your guys' support on that. So, once again, use the links in the Linktree to help support the show and support myself as well. I wanted to make mention of another 5-star review that we had just received in regards to the podcast. This one comes from BC Hunter on Podchaser, and he leaves a 5-star review. He says, Andy's one of the best wrestling historians that Canada has to offer. All episodes are must listen for any Canadian wrestling fan or wrestling fan in general. BC, I really appreciate that. And as everybody else knows, if you leave a 5-star review, I do read them out on the next available episode. So go ahead, whatever podcasting platform that you are using, if you have the option of leaving a 5-star rating and review, just know that those reviews will be read live on the air at the next available episode. I want to make mention as well, you can pick up a shirt to support the show, grapplingwithcanada.threadless.com. There's a bunch of designs up there, and the classic Grappling with Canada logo shirt, all proceeds of that will be going to support the local Children's Hospital charity here in friendly Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. You can contact me at any time on Twitter at 6_podcast. You can reach me via mail, 6sidepod@gmail.com. Please note that I respond to everybody, and I do read everything, including, anything on Twitter, anything like that. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be an upcoming guest on a couple of programs, so please keep it locked to at 6_podcast for everything going on with that. And also wanted to make mention, if you haven't heard it, I suggest that you check out the Sunday Night Army. I was on Jacob's show the other month. I was live, uncensored, and uncut, if you will. And that was a lot of fun. So once again, I want to thank Jacob for having me on that program. please make sure, after you're done listening to this program, check out the Sunday Night Army on all major podcast platforms. So, for myself, the Taxman, for my guests today, Mike Lano and Javier Ojst, to all of you, I won't leave you as I usually do because this program is going to be coming out in November. Remembrance Day is a big deal for myself, and I hope it is for all of you as well. There were a lot of Canadians who sacrificed everything to give us the country that we live in today. And while it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, their sacrifices must be remembered. And that's something that I take very much to heart every November. So I'm going to be playing at the last post at the end of this program because it's the least I can do to show my support for those who gave so much to this country. So, for all that being said, I will, however, leave you with the closing thoughts as I usually do. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night, everyone.